Let me start with a blonde joke. This blonde from Atlanta, Georgia, diddy bops onto an airplane with an economy class ticket, and she plops down in first class, and they can't get her to move. And finally, they're about to call security and do the hauling Chinese thing that United does so well. And the captain walks by and says, "I'll take care of this." He bends down, he whispers in her ear. She looks up at him with a startled, dull look, and she jumps up and runs back to her economy class seat. And the steward says, "Captain, that was magic. What did you do?" He said, "I told her first class wasn't going to Minneapolis." Now, there's a point to this story. In this life, we are all that blonde. All right? We're living a dream here. Now, I have a scripted speech because otherwise it would take all day. I put 2 weeks of my life into this, and I'm glad that I did. So let me begin by thanking John and the Arlington Institute, because you essentially forced me to go back over 2,000 plus books that I have read and reviewed in the past. And I was there to reflect on two things. One, what have I learned that is of lasting value? And two, how could I have been so very wrong in accepting some of these books at face value? Much of what we are told is a lie. All of our information systems are in a state of either collapse or corruption, from the academy to government to media to nonprofits. This lecture is in part my contribution to the Second American Revolution. The original concept for this briefing was to show how a well-educated, patriotic citizen, and by the way, I've never violated, for the feds in the audience, I've never violated my secrecy agreement, other than stating as a fact that I ran a false flag operation for the CIA. That's essential to my public narrative. So how did I go from being a Marine Corps infantry officer and former CIA spy, not an agent, that's treasonous scumbags that we pay, from blind acceptance to skeptical disillusionment? Well, 2,000 plus books plus 9/11. 9/11 was a trigger for me, and David Icke has an excellent book out on that. Here in 2 columns are my before and after condition. And let me also tell you all that these slides plus these words are online. So you can just let this flow over you and then go back, and please turn off your cell phones. So you'll be able to see this later today. But this is how I started. We didn't win the War of Independence. The Freemasons won the War of Independence. We didn't win World War II. We negotiated a treaty and Hitler exfiltrated with all of his gold, and the Nazis took over CIA and NASA, and so on and so forth. So I'm going to take you on a tour of 2,000 books, and I hope that at the end of that tour you are a different person, or at least are thinking differently. Now, I'm very impressed by the audience that John brings out, and I think you're the best possible people for me to try to communicate such ideas. Now, this is the lecture plan. It will take 90 minutes. My observations are integrated into the discussions of the books, and then I'll end with a summary of big picture type stuff. Now, I'm told I'm in a nest of Democrats, and that most of you hate Donald Trump.
Not true.
All right. Yeah, well, get over it, because he's a change agent, okay? He's a change agent. And by the way, Hillary Clinton has announced officially that Tulsi Gabbard is a Russian agent. So that pretty much sums up the state of the Democratic mindset right now. Actually, she died 4 years ago. We've been running a clone. No, I think Tulsi was setting herself up to be vice president for Trump, but Cynthia McKinney is my candidate. So let's have a conversation about the future, not the man. I do miss my library. It cost me over $500,000 to figure out that I read in 98 categories. And this is the library that I once had. I gave it up when I joined the United Nations briefly to work on a corruption commission in Guatemala. And it took 3. I'm obscenely proud of the fact that it took 3 specialist librarians from George Mason University to evaluate my library for a donation to GMU. I had no idea that I was reading in 97 nonfiction and 1 fiction category. Now, I apologize for the small print, but you will be able to blow this up later. You'll be able to easily read this slide if you go back to tinyurl.com/steele-top-books. These are the 98 categories of reading that have allowed me to do something no one else has done. No one else in the US government, for example, has actually created a holistic analytic model, integrated true cost economics, and thought about open source everything engineering, which cuts the cost of wealth, of a wealthy lifestyle by 90%. The truth teller that easily identifies any government policy or corporate product that is corrupt is the absence of true cost economics. All right, for example, automation. A true cost is lost jobs. These cell phones that we're all carrying have essentially 10 dead Chinese in each one of them from leukemia, because China is the only place where you can do Class A carcinogens with bare hands while putting the phone together. It's not possible to be an effective president or CEO if you are genuinely committed to the public interest, unless you do holistic thinking and true cost economics. And my mission in life is to get Donald Trump to implement #unrig, so that beyond Trump, we can have a Congress with 100 independents, Greens, Libertarians, and others that does evidence-based decisions in the public interest without corporate money interfering. That's what I'm about. Donald Trump is the best, fastest path to that end. So the true value of this lecture is to expose all of you to a free online resource. I had no idea I would one day end up having read over 2,000 nonfiction books in 97 categories. All of these lists, which I started doing before John asked me to do this, are free online, and they cluster, they sort all the books in interesting ways. I have tried to strike a balance between the positive and the negative. Now, here are a number of positive-oriented lists. And there's a lot of very good positive stuff out there. All of this can be accessed through my blog, phibetaiota.net, which is free with no advertising ever. Now, I also have a super list. Now, I have the equivalent of 3 graduate degrees. The first one, in international relations, I did an original graduate thesis on predicting revolution. 100% of the preconditions of revolution exist in the United States of America today. And the 2 biggest are concentration of wealth and loss of faith in the US government. All right, so we've got a lot of work to do. I don't think anyone else has done this. It's not only important for the president to understand all these negatives, to get the cabinet to work on them, but the president needs to understand the pressure points for the citizens. 70% of our citizens don't vote. They've given up. And you'll see me come back to the role of the educated citizen as we go forward. Now, I used Amazon's book ratings. I was the top Amazon reviewer for nonfiction. I was Amazon reviewer number 25 for the world for a while, until Amazon started manipulating how it does rankings and started banning people like me who were reviewing books that were critical of, for example, Zionism. I created a 6-star as a means of isolating transformative books that were cut above. You can't fail if you buy one of my 6-star books, but since so many of you have bought duplicate copies, what you all really should do is agree on each of you buying 1 book and then have a book circle one day. For this lecture, I created a 7th star. These are mind-altering, life-transformative books. Now, this was John's original plan. These are 3 books that blew my mind. And this is after I had spent 9 years as a clandestine case officer and 20 years as a Marine Corps infantry officer, most of it in the reserve. These 3 books are quite extraordinary. They cause me to wonder about the possibility that we are not being told the truth by anybody, by our government, by the academy, by media, by anybody, certainly not by religions either. I decided not to follow John's plan. Asshole. I'm talking about myself. I think I can do better for you, and I can do better for what I hope will be 1 million people that will see this video over time. Instead, I created a table of all of my reviews. I now have a Word document table with all of my reviews sortable by author, by topic, and by star rating, with a link to the review. Now, some of the links seem a little squirrely, but you can always go to my website and just look up review plus the first 2 or 3 words in the title, and you'll get right to my book review, which is a summary book review. This is my gift to myself. I don't care about all of you, but it's a gift to you too. I do care about you. I'm just being foolish. I'm going to talk about 25 world-changing books plus a second 25, and then I'm going to talk about 26 clusters of reading that contributes to the big picture. Now, it's my honor to know Judge Napolitano. I don't agree with his bashing of the president, but I do agree that the president has failed to defend the Constitution. The president of the United States is not defending the First Amendment, the Second Amendment, or the Fourth Amendment, and we need to fix that. This is the book. I read this book when I was in Afghanistan and working in Mistif A, excellent facility, 2013. This is the book that caused me to realize that the federal government, the executive, is completely out of control. We are in a state of endless war. And I'll keep coming back to Dick Cheney. But in fact, our state of endless war began with Theodore Roosevelt and Woodrow Wilson. And it began with Congress and the judiciary, the Supreme Court, not doing their jobs in the balance of power scheme of things. This book by George Will is a masterwork. It is a PhD, MD, everything. This is a huge, huge book. It essentially says the same thing, that Congress has abdicated its responsibility to the federal government, which now makes what's called administrative law. The president, by the way, love him or not, has just passed 2 executive orders that are sharply reducing the ability of the federal government to make regulations without public inputs. Okay, there is pushback happening at multiple levels, and you're not going to see CNN or MSNBC or even Fox. Fox is as traitorous as CNN covering this stuff. The second backup book is Mark Levin's The Liberty Amendments, although you could also do Ron Paul's book on liberty. I believe we need to have a national conversation about the Declaration of Independence, about the Constitution, about where we're going after Trump. Until my international conference was stolen from me by the Director of National Intelligence and destroyed because they were afraid of open source everything, open source intelligence. I used to bring 800 people to Washington to listen to 80 speakers, and Tom Atlee was one of those. Tom is a pioneer in collective intelligence and direct democracy. Most of what the president and everybody else needs to know is in open source intelligence, open source information. And the single greatest resource for a free and prosperous America is an educated public. These two things go together. Now, as my backup book, Cornel West, who easily deserves some kind of Nobel Prize, although that prize has been severely diminished. I mean, they gave it to Kissinger and Obama, okay? They gave it to a little girl that was a CIA op in Pakistan, the acid girl, okay? So the prize has been diminished, but it's still the gold standard in the vernacular. Cornel West is an utterly amazing human being, and President Trump should be listening to him and respecting him. John Caputo is both a theologian and a philosopher. I've found no other work that does a better job of showing how the truth can be found only in transit by being holistic and integrating all forms of knowing, including faith and including intuition, in conversation. Truth by yourself is not great sex. The truth cannot be dictated. In the absence of the truth, you cannot have a democracy. As a supporting book, I chose Michael Sandel on public philosophy. His core point is that liberalism, root word liberty, has lost its moral voice. Values matter. Today, the Democratic Party stands for, sorry guys, pedophilia and transgenderism. That is a prescription for self-immolation. This is one of the 5 most complicated books I've ever read. Actually, 2 of the 5 most complicated books I've ever read. But any president seeking to achieve sustainable peace and prosperity would benefit from having Robert Wright as an advisor. He takes the Hegelian thesis, antithesis, and synthesis to a new level. And the bottom line is as clear as Pogo once stated. We have met the enemy, and he is us. What we have done to ourselves and to the rest of the world, not just to humans, but to animals and plant life as well, has been a crime on an epic scale. Philip Allett's book, Health of Nations, is extremely complicated. He is a libertarian at heart. The state is an immoral construct. This book, by Wayne Jett, documents beyond doubt that the Great Depression was contrived by the banks to destroy the middle class, which was seeking commensurate political power with its growth, to buy up America at Depression-level prices, and to consolidate control over the U.S. government. And Franklin Delano Roosevelt was complicit in the Great Depression. The single greatest betrayal of the U.S. government, of its citizens, by the U.S. government, of its citizens, in addition to endless wars as a profit center for the 1%, is the government's tolerance, achieved through bribery and blackmail, of market manipulation by the banks, including the manipulation of interest rates and foreign exchange rates. The banks are our enemy, not China, not Russia, not Iran, not even Zionist Israel. The banks are our enemy because the U.S. government is not doing its job. The FBI is a theatrical agency. I mean, I love some of my FBI colleagues in a manly way. I.C. Smith in particular, who was the special agent in charge of Arkansas at a time when Bill Clinton was creating new forms of crime with the CIA. But like the CIA, the FBI, 90% good people trapped in a bad system. The system is corrupt to the bone. We need some deep house cleaning. Stephen Lendman's book, How Wall Street Fleeces America, brings this story up to date. The term deep state was first used in English, taken from a Turkish rendition by Peter Dale Scott, who made his name writing about the assassination of John F. Kennedy as a deep politics or deep state activity. Kennedy managed to piss off everybody. New York money, Texas oil, the FBI, which was founded by a pedophile who took small children from the mafia's gifts and pioneered political blackmail in the United States. And of course the Israelis, because Kennedy was going to stop nuclear trigger smuggling. There were 2 Israelis in Dallas to witness the assassination, Yitzhak Rabin and Arnon Milchan. Arnon Milchan, I believe, was the theatrical producer for 9/11. And the AIG floor was the one that was preset with the explosives to create the theatrical effects as the fake airplanes went in. This book on Rule by Secrecy is one of the greatest books I've ever read until David Icke's book, which I'll come to in a minute. And it documents the use of the central banks and secret societies to rule us all. At the end, it ties in extraterrestrials. All right, and we'll talk about extraterrestrials, and in my 90-minute spy improv Ask Me Anything, we can go into some of these topics. Charles Lewis's book, 935 Lies, is not only about 9/11, but about the total loss of morality across all of our institutions without exception, including the Boy Scouts of America. And of course, the Mormons. In comparison to Dick Cheney, Bill and Hillary Clinton are second-string traitors and criminals and pedophiles. This one book documents no fewer than 23 impeachable acts by Dick Cheney, including his enabling of the Zionist false flag attack that began planning in 1988 and is known as 9/11. Dick Cheney appears to be the most nakedly amoral person in America, followed by Hillary Clinton, and both, in my view, merit indictment and trial for treason. Mike Rupert's Crossing the Rubicon joins Vice and Rule by Secrecy, as well as all of the books by Peter Dale Scott and David Ray Griffin, as core readings on the deep state and how it has hijacked the U.S. government. This is one of the original 3 books. What opened my mind to the reality of extraterrestrials was an MIT conference and an MIT book resulting from that conference that documented abduction experiences around the world and compellingly suggested that they were telling the truth. I found Dr. Stephens Greer's books interesting as well. Then I was given a copy of this book. It is a mind blower, and I find it completely, absolutely credible. The bottom line is that the deep state is rooted in human trafficking deals with predatory stellar civilizations. But now, humanity's prayers are being answered, and some positive stellar civilizations are helping us beat back what has been going on for centuries. And remember now, pedophilia is not new. This was back with the Aztecs and the Mayans and child sacrifice and the whole bit. I mean, Afghanistan today, you still have dancing boys and so forth. George Cavallis's book, Our Universal Journey, is easily the equal of and radically complements the first book. I might also point out that if you go to Phi Beta Iota and you do a review, you'll not only get a review of the book, you'll get other links. And this particular review of the Universal Journey has all the other links to extraterrestrial stuff on my website. Okay, so I mean, literally, you can get another graduate degree just by camping on my website. And it's not me. I stand on the shoulders of thousands and thousands of others. I have about 80 regular contributors, about 8 weekly contributors, and so I'm simply curating this larger collective mind that is not my own. I think this man, Nassim Nicholas Taleb, should be an advisor to the president. He's better known as the author of Black Swan, but for presidential reflection purposes, this is the book to read. Localization is an imperative if we are to survive both unintended and contrived collapses. The president's infrastructure reboot should be reconceptualized towards sustainable localization rather than doubling down on industrial era centralization. If just-in-time supply chains go down, the USA East and West Coast run out of food in 2 weeks. By the way, I opened Hackers on Planet Earth in 1994, and I'm an elected member of Hackers Silicon Valley. Larry Page is a member. Larry's a great engineer. His ethics suck. Elinor Ostrom earned a Nobel Prize in Economics for her book, Governing the Commons, which complements this one. Only the locals know what rules make sense and how best to enforce them. And I cannot overstate the importance of the fact that we are the United States of America, not the United Mob of America. State sovereignty matters. This book was Will Durant's original PhD thesis. It is on a level with Plato's Republic and comes to the same conclusion. The education of the individual, teaching the individual to think critically and live free or die, is the core responsibility of honest government. Instead of what we have today, we're being dumbed down and drugged up. I mean, I listened to John's remarks carefully, and what he didn't tell you is that this guy that's coming next month has had problems finding a college student able to think correctly. Beyond this, ethics, not money, is the foundation for a prosperous society. And it is insane to separate political science, which is the art of corruption, from true cost economics, which is the art of connecting ends, ways, and means. As the companion book, I chose Paulo Freire's Pedagogy of Freedom. He emphasizes ethics as the heart of education and the vital role that honest history and respect for diversity play in nurturing liberty. Edgar Marine has 3 books at this level. Here are 2 of them. On Complexity, which is an indictment of everything we do now in the way of fake government, fake history, fake medicine, fake news, fake science. And his second book, Homeland Earth, which is almost an operating manual for any great leader. This is a book President Trump or any president could readily give to other presidents as a conversation starter. Our greatest crisis is our own inability to deal with complexity because we have allowed ignorant and corrupt bureaucracies to stovepipe everything. And I would add especially our secret intelligence community, which is retarded by design. We have shut down diversity of opinion and the ability to share knowledge across all boundaries. One of the things I'm hoping to do with my new company is create Web 3.0, which cannot be censored. No one else has produced a more succinct definition of 20 global problems and how to solve them. The author was at one time the vice president for Europe of the World Bank. We forgive him his sins. And he finds that all global institutions, without exception, are wanting, if not outright toxic. I mean, the IMF has just admitted it destroyed Colombia and Venezuela and Ecuador. Okay? The stuff that we are doing through United Nations agencies is destructive, not constructive. It's like injecting someone with syphilis to save them from the disease. The runner-up is A More Secure World, a UN publication in which Lieutenant General Brent Scowcroft, U.S. Air Force, was the U.S. representative. For the first time, the 10 high-level threats to humanity are listed and prioritized. And I see here I'm running a little bit ahead of time, so I'm going to name, and I don't think there's anyone else in Washington, D.C. that can do this. I am going to name, in priority order, the 10 high-level threats to humanity that are documented in this book, 8 of which are ignored by the U.S. intelligence community. Poverty, infectious disease, environmental degradation, interstate conflict, civil war, genocide, other atrocities, which includes trafficking in humans, proliferation, terrorism, and transnational crime. Those are the 10 high-level threats to humanity. And our cabinet agencies are perpetuating all of those threats because they work for the people receiving the U.S. taxpayer dollar, not for the U.S. taxpayer. We need an honest government, desperately. Dorrance is the other author that has 2 books in my top 25 lineup, top 50 lineup. This one was co-authored with his wife Ariel, and it's the summary volume for his 11-volume History of Civilization. It might also be called Story of Civilization. 11 volumes. The 2 sets of books that I did not give to George Mason University were the great books out of the University of Chicago, 53 volumes, and The History of Civilization, 11 volumes. I have not read them, but I like looking at them. Here again, the education of the individual citizen, with parents being the foundation for a child's education, not state-sponsored education, and certainly not core curriculum, is vital. He also stresses border integrity and ethnic coherence, something that both the USA and Russia have lost. Siberia is half Chinese right now. Okay? Putin is desperately losing the race. China is moving. And by the way, for those of you that are upset about Hispanics, I'm a Hispanic. My mother was born in Colombia, Spanish roots. Let me just point out that we stole everything from the Guadalupe Hidalgo line down to the border with Mexico with a war that was based on lies. Okay? They've simply recovered what we stole from them. Get over it. Once Home Depot has everything in Spanish and English, something's changed. Okay, if they have Chinese, I'm going to start to worry. Having served 9 years as a CIA clandestine case officer or spy, I did 3 back-to-back tours, 5 times the regional recruiting average. But now, in retrospect, I realize no one ever held me accountable for surveillance detection routes. And the CIA operates out of official installations. It's impossible to be a clandestine case officer operating out of an official installation on a US passport. You just can't do it. Okay, so we're living a dream, and I've written a very well-read post on how there are 7 CIAs, probably 10 CIAs. But the bottom line here is I think the CIA that people think is just like a theatrical CIA. And then there are these other little CIAs, including drone assassination CIA, the torture and rendition CIA, the pedophilia and drug trafficking CIA and domestic USA, the CIA that controls judges, and so forth. What does it say to you when NSA can collect every single email and every single phone call, and we still have traitors, pedophiles, and white-collar criminals? Could it be that NSA wants it that way? This book by a Russian counterintelligence officer shocked me. And it tied together so many dots that I had been seeing over time that I had not put together. One of them jumps out, and this is not from the book, but from another story, where basically the US intelligence community took over the rap industry in order to turn blacks into criminals that could be put into profit-making prisons. Okay? And we ran crack cocaine. I mean, John Deutsch was probably telling the truth when he tearfully told Los Angeles he wasn't responsible for the crack cocaine explosion. But I know for a fact that it was CIA contractors running in drugs for Blandón from Nicaragua into El Toro Air Base, where one of my Marine colonels was killed, suicided, because he was about to blow the whistle on the fact that the United States Marine Corps was the primary receiving air station for drugs from Central America, which were going into Los Angeles, where where Ricky Ross, an entrepreneur, was making $2 million a day, turning cocaine into $5 crack. Okay? We're dirty. We're dirty across the board. And that has to stop. David Talbot's The Devil's Chessboard documents the creation of the CIA as a Wall Street penetration of the US government, an organization intended to serve as the lily pad for leveraging the US military and other elements. Colonel Fletcher Pooty's The Secret Team amplifies on this. Sidney Powell, whom I'm honored to know, is in my view the best qualified person to replace Justice Ruth Bader Ginsburg when the time comes. Not only has Sidney written the complete indictment of the Bush-Obama Department of Justice and the FBI as a criminal network, she is also the attorney for my most esteemed colleague Mike Flynn and certain to get him vindicated. We have a copy of the Department of Justice memo that exonerates Flynn completely, that they don't want to give up. Now they know we have a copy. So I expect that case to break open by Thanksgiving. Justice is supposed to be about fairness. And Sidney, who quotes several of the Supremes with respect, has shown that in fact the Department of Justice today is lying to the court, and lazy, ill-qualified judges, many of them being blackmailed with pedophilia tapes, okay, are letting them get away with it. Congress has made it legal for the Department of Defense to cover up how it's spending money, which is part of covering up the secret space program, which was never authorized or appropriated by Congress. Okay, so we have some catching up to do. The runner-up book is Integrity, Good People, Bad Choices, and Life Lessons from the White House. Matt Tabhi has written 2 books that make it clear that America is now divided into 2 classes. The 1%, who can get away with multi-billion-dollar theft from the middle class and outright murder when they wish, and the 99% who are treated like cockroaches, a Zionist term used when they train our police. The divide documents how under Obama and Holder, DOJ gave up going after Wall Street and CO crime and turned it into civil penalties, No one goes to jail. Instead, police are running up their budgets and their numbers by arresting black people for standing alone in front of their house at midnight. Their crime? Obstructing pedestrian traffic. I'm not making this shit up. The IRS has just admitted it's going after poor people for back taxes because they can't get the rich people. Our government is totally, totally broken in the most fundamental possible ways. Some time ago, I identified the top 5 books for the information era. These are 2 of them. I think Paul Straussman's Information Payoff and a book called The Exemplar were another 2, and I don't remember what the 5th one was. Once again, with the Knowledge Executive, we come back to a recurring theme. Education is what leaders do if they want to be the greatest president in all time, or the greatest CEO, or the greatest dean, or whatever. This book helped me to see the U.S. secret intelligence community for what it is, a naked, evil posturer that is not helpful to the president, nor good for the republic. And General Tony Zinni is on record as saying that when he was commander of Central Command, fighting 2 wars and running 12 joint task forces, most sinks are designed to have 2 task forces at a time, he got at best 4% of what he needed to know from the secret intelligence community. And what they're doing today with open source intelligence is a mockery of the term. It's old, fat, white women with young, black interns doing social media surfing. It's disgusting. Alvin Toffler became a friend and wrote a chapter built around me, The Future of the Spy, for his book, War and Anti-War. But this second book of his, Power Shift, is the book for the modern era. He makes the point that information is a good that can be shared without being lost, and it creates wealth. Privatizing government information, which is what we're doing today, is a huge mistake. And by the way, Amazon is in violation of all of its customer agreements. It is doing cross-fertilization across stovepiped databases. It is doing massive Fourth Amendment violations. And I hope the day comes when Amazon loses every single government contract it has, because this is not cool. And by the way, as with NSA, anything that's in Amazon is in Tel Aviv. Okay, so get used to it. This is one of the other most complicated books I've ever read, Concilium. This is a guy who got his start studying ants. And ants are complicated creatures. They're a whole wild-ass collective intelligence grid. He's the gold standard for documenting why education, intelligence, and research must be holistic rather than what we have now, stovepipe silos of idiocy and secrecy and corruption. As with Dorrance and Morin, the value is in being holistic, inclusive, open, sharing, and not reductionist or dogmatic. Peter A. Corning's book, Holistic Darwinism, another one of the most complicated books I've ever read, is easily a 7-star book. I just had to draw the line somewhere. Corning makes the case for synergy and for bioeconomics. Permaculture basically does what Monsanto tries to do by poisoning the earth by mixing different kinds of plants. Okay? Permaculture essentially allows you to raise plants without pests and without poisoning the earth. Okay? So we have completely blown it on bioeconomics. And he is pointing out that we need to understand, going back centuries, how the whole earth demands respect, demands nurturing, and we need to understand just how much damage we have done. He also makes the point that ethics is education and information on steroids. Although I have been aware that the Nazis did not really lose World War II, that Hitler and his top people escaped to Argentina with great wealth by treaty with the USA, and that we turned over CIA and NASA to the Nazis, I simply did not realize the depth and breadth of Nazi evil is manifested through mind control and human trafficking, including off-planet human trafficking, of which I have no direct knowledge. But I'm satisfied by the sources that I've examined that this is real. Microcosm and Medium by Joseph Farrell is a superb complement to the first book. Let me point out, this is one of the 3 books that John and I had originally discussed. I do want to note that there are fraudulent books out there. Bryce Taylor's Thanks for the Memories is a copycat book that names Bob Hope, and I think falsely so. And I've written a review of Thanks for the Memories that points out where she got the information and whose movie script she stole and so forth. When I started contemplating the reality that we are all chattel, I had to look it up, property, in the eyes of the 1%, we're all disposable deplorables. That includes all you Democrats. You're disposable deplorables. I had a loss of faith. I mean, I've been very gloomy, not depressed. I'm fortunate. I have a blessed life. And my wife still has a job working for the U.S. government. But she's one of the good people trapped in a bad system. But this is what President Trump needs to grasp if he is to be the greatest president ever. Until he can get 100% of our citizens and voters both educated and mobilized. There's nothing worse than an ignorant voter. Okay? I mean, that's just basically a mob. He will just be another transient politician. If Donald Trump wants to have a legacy, it has to center on including every citizen in the process. That's why #unrig matters. Okay? And on educating the citizens. I even look to see a constitutional convention one day. But first you have to educate the citizens, otherwise you'll have morons like Ralph Nader saying eliminate the Electoral College. We don't like having white people in the middle of the country having a vote, which is what that's all about, by the way. There is this massive pushback on white people who are being demonized in a manner most foul. Trump's staff is doing well, and I think he'll win the base, and I think if we don't have a major economic collapse, all of the models say he's going to be reelected. Sorry. But his campaign staff and his White House staff are not doing anything to reach blacks, independents, women, and Latinos. They're just not doing it. We need to mobilize the 70% that have given up on America and bring them back into the system, and we need to give them a Congress that represents America, not a Congress that is a two-party tyranny. I've got this great graphic of a vulture on top of the House of Culture with one red wing and one black wing and a joker's face, and the caption says, "One bird, 2 wings, same shit." Okay? That's your Congress, and you allowed it to happen. I did too. So this is the center of gravity for the Second American Revolution. People. All of them. Not just 30% of them. I was honored to know Jonathan Schnell, the author of this book. Now you're right, I am running behind time. Sort of. I selected him to teach a senior executive course until the Office of Personnel Management realized I was a radical free thinker, at which point the course was terminated. But for a while there, I was teaching senior executive wannabes. With his help, I began to understand that most wars are contrived as profit centers for the banks. And oh, by the way, the insurance companies all know about disasters before they happen. Okay, insurance is the single greatest criminal scam on the planet other than printing money. And oh, by the way, if you own a bank, you can give yourself $3 billion that you don't actually have and transfer it by SWIFT, and the other bank will accept it as if it were real. And then you can use it to buy real estate. Okay, we have a system that is just totally out of control. Now, I really love this book, Surrender to Kindness. All of you leftist center types should read this book. It is heartwarming, mind-twisting. It is a definitive catalog of everything that we should have done in Afghanistan and did not do. Okay? And it goes with Marianne Williams' Politics of Love, which, by the way, I think Thom Hartmann wrote that book, but it's still a good book. Almost everything we are told about Muslims is a lie. The Zionists control our universities, our media, and our government. In fact, Zionists in the U.S. government have recently been outed for telling universities that if they teach honest Muslim history, they will lose their federal funding. I don't make this stuff up. Benazir Bhutto, who is dead now, she was assassinated for seeking to take on the regime. Oh, by the way, Pakistan, the deal is the U.S. military reopened the poppy fields that the Taliban had shut down, and Pakistan military processes all of that opium into number 4 heroin in the plants in Pakistan. And then the banks get their cut, okay? As does the dark side of the U.S. government, which runs on drug money, not on the so-called budget that is scratching the bucket, or whatever the phrase is. Along with Queen Noor, who was raised in Princeton and was a U.S. citizen at one time, whose book Leap of Faith, Memoirs of an Unexpected Life, documents both the ignorance of the West of the Muslim world and the decadence and the evil of the West in Muslim eyes, Bhutto is the gold standard for reconciliation. Now, let me say very clearly, I am strongly opposed to not only Sharia law, but also the Noahide laws and the Talmudic laws, which are not the Bible, okay, and any attempt to run a state by religious guidelines. Separation of state and church is absolutely vital, but the churches and the religion should not be used as forms of crowd control and as forms of dogmatic organization. This runner-up book, Culture of Critique, documents the perfidy of the Zionists and the ultra-Orthodox Jews who are actively sabotaging the U.S. government, the U.S. economy, and U.S. society. This book has been banned at Amazon, but is still sold by Barnes & Noble. Okay. Oh, Jeff Bezos, by the way, I am hearing from people that Jeff Bezos is now censoring Kindle books and CreateSpace books at the word and paragraph level without telling the authors. All right, so I don't think retard is that bad a word, but if you dare use the word retard, they'll take it out. Okay? This is really amazing. People don't understand that we're in a digital gulag right now. We are not in control of our lives or our information. This is such an extraordinary book that I spent 2 weeks reading it and another 2 weeks creating a 40-page summary of the 741-page book, which you can find free online at phibetaiota.net. David is the single best author on what is not a Jewish conspiracy to take over the world. It's not even a Zionist conspiracy to take over the world. It's a satanic, I can't even pronounce the word, Sabbatarian conspiracy to take over the world. And it's worked. And they've been using the Freemasons and Opus Dei and Knights of Malta and so forth. I mean, we've had cases where a senior CIA officer who is a member of the Knights of Malta and a senior KGB officer who is a member of the Knights of Malta collaborate against their respective countries. Okay? There are loyalties above the state that our mediocre counterintelligence people are not sniffing out. In part because, and I don't think this is in the speech, so let me take a moment to say this, the National Security Agency does not provide signals intelligence support to domestic FBI counterintelligence operations or overseas clandestine operations. I once gave a bottle of scotch to the SIGINT guy in one of the countries where I was working, and I said, look, I'm one of the first 2 people on the planet assigned terrorism full-time. Why don't you give me any hits you get on these 15 targets? And the next day, I had a printout of hits on those 2 targets. I went back on the second day. I said, well, do I have to bring another bottle of scotch? He said, no, I just did it as an experiment. You're not on the authorized list for receiving support. Because at the time, Nicaragua was a 1 and terrorism was a 7. And basically NSA was not providing support to the field station to do clandestine operation spotting, assessing, recruiting, and so forth. Okay, our system doesn't work. It just does not work. It's, Bill Binney says this, it's basically a whole bunch of stovepipes whose sole objective in life is to increase their budget and get post-retirement jobs. All right, this has to change. But this is an extraordinary book. And his new book, Trigger, although it repeats a lot of the stuff that I and others have written about on 9/11, his new book, Trigger, talks about how 9/11 was, in essence, an endgame move towards subverting the whole earth, making it possible to create a police state in the United States and endless war overseas. What's changed is Donald Trump. My best-selling Kindle is called The Accidental President. Okay, Trump did not expect to win. He did not want to win. His wife was in tears when he won. I am quite certain he spent his first 30 days thinking about how to avoid assassination. Okay, and he still has that problem. So this is an absolutely amazing book. It was not in the original 3 that John and I talked about, but certainly you should read my 40-page summary of this book, if nothing else. I didn't want to focus on Zionism. I never gave a thought to Zionism until Zionists fucked me good by killing #unrig 6 ways in 90 days. And I tell that story at tinyurl.com/Google Gestapo. Within 30 days of AIPAC and the ADL noticing that Cynthia McKinney and I had something that was raising $250,000 or more on the premise of #unrig, meaning America first, not Israel first, a guy started defaming me on video as a thief and a con man. I have a federal lawsuit that goes to trial in March 2020. I won't discuss it any further, but I'm quite confident that 90 videos in which I'm called a thief and a con man with no evidence are going to play well with the jury. I had over 450 documented cyber stalkers who tried to close down my funding channels at PayPal and Indiegogo and told every interviewer that had ever interviewed me in history that I was a thief and a con man. They reported all of my websites as pornographic websites. They gamed the system so that then you're automatically not accessible from universities and governments and so forth. Meetup canceled my $77,000 paid program with a meetup in each of 435 congressional districts. At the same time that Meetup was waiving the fees for 1,087 #resist meetups, co-sponsored by, wait for it, the Anti-Defamation League. Okay? And then there was something else in there. But the bottom line is literally #unrig became public enemy #1 for the Zionist lobby in the United States of America. Boy, did they get my attention. And I will be back. This book, I'm hoping to get a grant soon. This book is going to be translated into Arabic, Chinese, Farsi, French, Russian, Spanish, and Turkish. And we're going to put this book all over the world. This is the book that makes the absolute case, along with Shlomo San's The Invention of the State of Israel, that Palestine needs to return to the Palestinians. If there were one single point of intervention on this planet to spark goodness and consciousness and righteousness returning, it's restoring Palestine to the Palestinians. Not that I give a shit about the Palestinians. Just as a practical matter, this is the cancerous sore on the whole earth, in my personal view. And by the way, Harry Truman was bribed to accept this, and Winston Churchill was bribed to make this happen. Every single American in military, diplomatic, and commercial positions told Harry Truman, this is going to create a 200-year problem. And Truman still went with it. Okay? We need to start making evidence-based decisions. Okay, so that was the first half of the brief. Those 50 books are my recommendations for Book of the Month Club. Okay? And you would be well served if you got 49 friends to each buy one of those books and then you all had a conversation about them over time. Now, with that as a preamble, here is the other 2,000 books in the same amount of time. And these are the 26 topics that I chose to focus on. I think we need a national conversation about all of these topics. The state of the people is strong, the state of the union is not. I especially love this book on the average American. This guy, this the author spent 2 years looking for the average American. And at the very end of the book, he came back to a guy who he thought was the average American and who he had decided, if this guy doesn't send me an email in the 6 months since I told him that he's the average American, he came back to the average American and he says, hey, you're the average American. And the guy said, wow, what an honor. Exactly. What an honor to be an average American. Okay? So this is really, I got goosebumps. This is one of the most exciting clusters of books around. Now, where the president is going wrong is he's not listening to America. He's trumpeting, or he's twittering, and Twitter is screwing the president, okay? The president is reaching 40% of the numbers that he could reach if Twitter were honest. Twitter is dishonest. And Zuckerberg is having a come-to-Jesus meeting with himself because he's starting to realize we could screw him out of existence in the next 90 days. He's starting to realize that Facebook could literally lose all of its value overnight. And by the way, half of the Facebook accounts are fake, okay? Which means that Zuckerberg is probably guilty of securities fraud because his valuation is based on the total number of accounts. And if half of them are fake, this is a crime, okay? So there's some good books in here. Jim Fallows wrote with his wife Deborah, Our Towns. He flew 100,000 miles around. And what he discovered is that across America, normal people like you actually are working together and don't really give a shit about what's going on in Washington. Now that's a mistake, because what's going on in Washington is basically killing the United States of America. But across America, I think we are healthy. Where we're not healthy is in our government. Our labor union leaders have sold us out, and America's political elite has sold us out. Elites worldwide. And by the way, if you notice that Macron and people like this don't have children, I believe most world leaders are either totally bribed or totally blackmailed, and in 50% or more of the cases have participated in a satanic ritual abuse ceremony. Okay? This is just my personal opinion, but I am the hell am I? I'm a commissioner and the chief counsel for the Judicial Commission of Inquiry into Human Trafficking and Child Sex Abuse. And some of the shit that we hear is scary. And by the way, it's not just the Catholics. It's the Mormons, it's the Presbyterians, it's the Christian evangelicals. I mean, I remember one Christian evangelical that was going on and on about how great God was and sex with his wife was perfect, and then they found him in a hotel room with a gay snorting coke. Okay? So the hypocrisy and the evil across all of our so-called elites is quite extraordinary. We've destroyed families and communities. There's an excellent book that's probably not shown here called The Manufacture of Evil. When the industrial system destroyed kinship as a foundation for trust, lowering the cost of doing business, they basically destroyed the family, they destroyed the community, they destroyed all of the true costs calculations that go into having robust, sustainable local communities. I have to say, on a positive note, from Marianne Williamson on the left to Tommy Lauren on the right, we are waking up. Across America, people are waking up. And I think 9/11 was a very important part of that. I think 9/11 was what we would call cognitive dissonance on a global scale. I mean, when Donald Trump says on TV those buildings were brought down by controlled demolitions, when one of the TV studios starts announcing the fall of the building 7 minutes before it happens, you know, all of this stuff adds up. And guys like me are basically a little bit of a prod. And what's happening now is average Americans are starting to realize that all of these things are lies and that we need to move forward. People are the new superpower. Localization and hashtag unrig, holistic analytics, and true cost economics is how we get the power back, and it's how we create a prosperous world at peace that works for all. I'm just sick as I contemplate the century of evil done in our name. This first book, Gold Warriors, the author died last year, but I knew him. We captured a map of 175 buried treasure sites in the Philippines that the Japanese had put because we had cut their submarine lines from the Philippines to Japan. There are another 150 tunnels and such in Indonesia and also in Korea. One of the reasons the Koreans are coming together is because they're going to marry up cheap North Korean labor with the gold that's buried with the South Korean economy, and they're going to create a new mega economic zone in that whole area. It's going to be very interesting. Who would have thought? I broke the story on the Koreas on the 4th of March. I was called a lunatic. And I think the president or his people were a little torqued because about 2 weeks later they broke the story officially. Okay, it wasn't supposed to come out. I just happened to know a Japanese princess who was the liaison to the North Koreans, and she gave it to me. Okay, who would have thought the North Korea would unify and denuclearize? I will tell you the Middle East will denuclearize next. Okay, and there's more. We can get into ETs and neutralizing nuclears in the Q&A. Let me point out that Empire of Illusion, which is in the lower thing, it could have been in the upper, is very important because it drives home the point again that the only power that can stand up to evil is educated, mobilized voters. But you need all of them, not just 30% of them. Okay, so my mission in life is to give every one of our eligible voters, cross-checked against Social Security, because most state voting rolls are fraudulent, okay? And there are a number of people who are allowed to vote in New York and Florida by design, okay? One by absentee ballot, the other physically. Okay, we need to clean all that up. Now, I think Bill Clinton is under some form of mind control. I've heard some pretty shocking stories. And I basically think he was captured in Arkansas. And the difference between Bill Clinton and Jimmy Carter is that Carter kept his integrity and Clinton didn't. And one of these days, Jimmy Carter's going to tell the story. As I've heard it, he broke down in tears after he was elected, not realizing that he was a puppet. He put together a list of the best and the brightest for the cabinet. And then the Rockefeller guy came in and said, oh no, this is your cabinet, and handed him the list of the approved cabinet members. And that's the point at which Carter realized he was had. I've heard a similar story about Obama. Okay. Trump, hate him or not, is a completely different kettle of fish. I don't know if I said this before the meeting or during, but in Team of Vipers, Jack Welch walks out of a meeting with Trump, and he's quoted in Team of Vipers as saying they can say what they want about him. Talking to that man was like talking to a peer, not a politician. Trump being thought of by Jack Welch as a peer strikes me as an important comment to take into account the next time you want to badmouth the guy. There's something going on there that I don't understand. And yes, he talks to us as if we're in the 5th grade, because that works. Okay? Lock her up. That works. But behind that 5th grade show, there's something else going on. And I don't know what it is. I'm not privileged. I have no access, but something's going on. These lower books, the last two are mine. The False Flag Attacks and 9/11 Truth are mine. They're both free online at phi-beta-iota.net. Trigger is David Icke's book. And then all the rest. You know, this is all well documented. There are 53 known false flag operations that are absolutely incontrovertibly proven beyond a shadow of a doubt, including the assassination of John F. Kennedy. Okay? But the mainstream media is not going to touch that because they're not allowed to. So we need to get to where we can touch that. I love this book, Improper Behavior, When Misconduct is Good for Society. There comes a time when the law is wrong, and you have to confront it in a nonviolent way. It's insane to make political correctness the law of the land. It's insane to require that children at the age of 8 to 12 be taught 40 different ways of being a pervert, which is what California is doing. I mean, frankly, I went to California to give a speech. I couldn't fill my gas tank because they had one of these goddamn stupid things for ether control, and it kept shutting off because a fucking little ether thing was popping out, okay? Why anyone lives in California other than the pedophiles is beyond me. We need an active, vibrant democracy, and the surest form of public control of insane people is open dialogue. The health industry is a massive insurance fraud. We basically have pharmaceuticals that are creating drugs that make us worse, and hospitals that give us more diseases than we arrived with. At the same time, for lack of true cost economics and integrity, the US government has allowed agriculture and industry to poison our food, our air, our land, and our water. And electromagnetic pollution is a major issue. 5G is genocidal and ecocidal. And oh, by the way, it's now coming out that all these virtual reality things have been frying your children's brains. Okay, the laser electromagnetic stuff is really bad for you. Infectious disease is global to local number threat, with poverty as number one and environmental degradation. Poisoning, not climate change. Climate change and global warming are a fraud. It is the sun that determines where we're at in any given era. Okay, but poisoning of the planet and the elimination of diversity, that is a huge threat, because diversity is what allows for evolution to take place at multiple nuanced levels. Okay? Public health, in my personal view, needs to be nationalized the way police and fire services are. We need to make public health something that comes with being a citizen. Or whatever. The whole way we're structured, 3/4 of health, healthy living, healthy environment, natural medicine, is not what we have now. What we have right now is profit from disease, profit from death. And oh, by the way, in Florida, they've turned stripping the elderly of their assets into an art form. I mean, you go to Florida to die, they will find a way to pick you clean and make you a ward of the state and take your estate. Okay? And this is also happening in Texas and Arizona and New Mexico and a whole bunch of other places. Basically, the way it works, and they're very selective, but they will start drugging you up, and then they will get to where you're declared incompetent, made a ward of the state. They like people who don't have relatives. And then as soon as you become a ward of the state, you're institutionalized and they take everything you own. Okay? The FBI is not doing anything about this. This is just, it's crazy. I became a Marine because I couldn't tell what 2 + 2 was for the Army test. But I think economics is really, really undervalued. Economics done right is about creating a prosperous world at peace. And these books here, I checked, all of the authors are alive, including Herman Daly, who was one of my mentors early on. Ecological Economics, Infinite Wealth by Barry Carter, Fortune at the Bottom of the Pyramid. The 1 billion rich have a total aggregate income of $1 trillion. The 5 billion poor have a total aggregate income of $4 trillion. But they buy different things. The rich want a sub-zero fridge for $3,000 that they have to replace every 3 years. The poor want a ceramic jar with an air gap inside of another ceramic jar that they bury in the ground and it keeps meat fresh for 5 days. Totally different economics. Okay? I mean, our next priority, and I think I address this here later, is free energy and unlimited desalinated water. But bottom line here is that free information and taking away the secrecy orders from the 6,000 patented technologies that are classified, and a few other things, are how we create a prosperous planet at peace. I seriously doubt anybody in the White House has read any one of these books. Education, huge. We're beating the creativity out of our children by the time they're in the 5th grade. They spend 18 years locked down, having to raise their hand to go to the bathroom, learning mostly useless stuff that they're then tested on with rote learning. They're not taught how to learn, how to think, or how to create. I don't have John Taylor Gatto's Weapons of Mass Instruction here. I meant to, but it does appear in a later slide. I personally believe the president needs 3 deputy vice presidents. One for global engagement that covers state, defense, and commerce. One for the Commonwealth that covers everything else, and one for education, intelligence, and research. And if I were such a vice president, the first people to have their balls cut off will be everyone working at DARPA. These are the people that are creating artificial dogs that can't get out of a bramble bush. Okay? I mean, all of this stuff, again, these are not stupid people. These aren't even immoral people. These are people trapped in a bad system where you get promoted based on doing bullshit for money. Okay? Gotta fix that. This is a very heavy-duty cluster. Chalmers, Johnson, and Bloom, I think, have died. But the first 2 books are the most important. By the way, the last bin Laden to be killed was a fake bin Laden. It was a gift from the Pakistani government to Obama for re-election. SEALs died for political theatrics. McRaven knows this, which is why he turned all the files over to CIA and cut himself loose. And so the library in the last fake bin Laden's thing was also fake. That was some boy genius in covert action staff at CIA thinking about what kind of library do I want bin Laden to have. Never occurred to me as a Marine Corps officer, as a Marine Corps infantry officer, not a medical specialist, or as a spy, to question what we were doing as a republic. The entire system is geared toward blind obedience. Don't question authority. Well, we hung people at the Nuremberg trials for failing to question authority, for obeying illegal orders. An order is illegal if it's unconstitutional. And part of the problem with our flag officer corps is they only think they have 2 choices, obey or resign. They don't. They have a 3rd choice, which is say no and then tell Congress. Okay? Most of them don't have the balls to do that. Enough. Ron Paul has it absolutely right. We need a foreign policy of peace, commerce, and friendship. And I think, like him or not, that's actually what Donald Trump is trying to get to. All right, I've already spoken on this. Nuclear power is insane. One of the reasons it's insane is because most of our nuclear plants are in flooding areas. If you go to Phi Beta Iota and you look up graphic nuclear, you'll see a map of where our major nuclear plants are, and they're all in 100-year flood zones. So Fukushima times 100. All right? It makes no sense. Now, I do think free energy is coming out, and once we have free energy, that will change everything. I am anticipating free energy in a second Trump term. And if there is no second Trump term, I'm anticipating free energy after 2024. The sun matters. Climate change and global warming are fraud. How many of you watched the drooling retard at the United Nations? Did anyone see that? Yeah. Yeah, Greta. They trotted out a mind-controlled retard who was scripted, who is being massively funded by George Soros and people like that as the little darling of climate change. Oh, you've killed us all. Bullshit. Okay? And then, sorry, I'm going to torment you Democrats. Then Donald Trump did not declare war on Iran. Oops. That was the whole idea. That was what Israel wanted at that United Nations speech. They wanted Donald Trump to declare war on Iran. Okay? He didn't do it. This is what we would call cognitive dissonance, okay? The orange baboon is not doing what you're expecting him to do. maybe there's a good reason. All right? Donald Trump's, by the way, I've been working behind the scenes to try and not only get Rouhani to meet Trump, which I think happened. If you don't know this, Rouhani is fluent in English and has nuclear, religious, and parliamentary backgrounds, and is also totally, absolutely loyal to the supreme leader. He's not really a president, he's more like a chief of staff. The supreme leader is really the go-to guy in Iran. I think Trump has met with Rouhani, and I think Trump will make a state visit to Iran before Election Day. Okay? And since it's written into the Iranian constitution that Palestine needs to come back to the Palestinians, and since the Adelsons just threw Netanyahu under the bus by calling his wife crazy, and it looks like the Rothschilds have also made a deal and are coming home, bottom line, Zionist Israel will be uninvented in my lifetime. And Palestine will be returned to the Palestinians. Now, having said that, let me also point out that the Russians and the Chinese have spent billions on a Jewish autonomous oblast in Russia and a Jewish autonomous zone in China, connected by billions of dollars of rail and road, all leading to what could be a new port, the port of New Haifa, on North Korean land to be ceded as part of this new economic zone. This is not a story you're going to see in the New York Times or the Washington Post. But you heard it here first. I love this slide. I could spend a lifetime, a PhD on this. Evolutionary dynamics. Complex societies collapse when elite mismanagement, class conflict, social dysfunction, and a complete lack of ability to access and make sense of information. 1986, a 4-foot-high redhead named Diane Webb came up with 18 things the CIA needed to be able to do at a desktop to make sense of information, including pattern analysis, anomaly detection, on-the-fly foreign language translation, whatever. We don't have those 18 functionalities today. Trillions of dollars later, we don't have those functional capabilities. Nobody wants us to be making sense. All right? They don't want us to know what the true facts are. They don't want us to be able to say, wait a minute, if you do this, then this. Okay? So collective intelligence and the tools for collective intelligence actually become very, very important. I really think that this is one of my most positive slides. I think we're on our way somewhere in a very positive, interesting way. Okay, extraterrestrial. I was briefed. I may have met an extraterrestrial. I don't know. I'm not completely sure. But I was briefed by a NASA PhD on our base on Mars. We also have bases in Saturn. There was a time when we were doing wormhole travel. I believe this. I have no direct experience. I've read every single one of these books. I've summarized every single one of these books. And I absolutely believe there are no fewer than 26 stellar civilizations active on Earth, and that the good guys are winning. From extraterrestrial to God and religion, it doesn't get any better. They're the same thing. I'm waiting for one of you to say, how can you believe in extraterrestrials? My answer is, how can you believe in God? They're actually the same thing and the same end game. The ultimate form of life is energy with infinite love of galactic scale. Period. And Einstein said, we're all energy. This is just slow-moving energy. Okay? I'm not ready quite to believe that we're all a software program and I'm a bug. But it could be. It could be. All of these books are extraordinary. Left Hand of God. I mean, there's some guys I really admire. Pastor Chuck Baldwin, Rabbi Michael Lerner, Chaplain Jim Wallace. If I were president, I'd have a national prayer office, and I'd have all three of those guys doing a morning prayer out of the White House every single day. And I would be seeking to get people back to a religion that is community-oriented, charity-oriented, not dogmatic, and certainly not in the service of a foreign power, including the Vatican. Okay, the Vatican would lose diplomatic privileges the minute I became president. I think full disclosure of 9/11 combined with full disclosure of Epstein. If you like tiny URLs, look up 9-veil-9 veils evil. I've done a full exposure on the. I'm the guy who called Epstein a Mossad operative in 2008 or whenever back then. And you all know Ghislaine Maxwell is the daughter of Robert Maxwell, who's the most famous Israeli spy in U.S. history. Okay, Ghislaine is probably the operator. Epstein is actually the employee. Okay, Epstein is the fool who couldn't get a decent job, who was then sheep-dipped at Bear Stearns and then given $1 billion by Wexler, who's one of the mega groups, one of these, there are about 9 Zionist billionaires that fund subversion in the United States of America. And the Brofmans are one, and Wexler's another, okay? So all of this is known. I personally think Epstein is still alive in U.S. hands and singing like a bird. And the deep state knows this. Good. Okay, we'll come back to this in the Q&A. I need to rush through here. This is actually taking me longer because I've done what I swore I wouldn't do, which is I've been extemporaneous. This is another superb collection of books. You know, all of them are wonderful. The most important is John Lewis Gaddis, who was also in my first 50. He calls history a denied area. Most of what we're reading in the history books is absolute crap. And most of science is absolute crap. There's actually, John and I were talking about this beforehand, there's multiple levels of reality and knowledge, and basically we're at the retard level. And that's by design. That's what they want us doing. They want us doing retarded science and retarded history, which is why I want an open source agency. I will die a happy man if Donald Trump will let me create an open source agency, which is what CIA has fought me on for 30 years, because they know damn well that the day I have an open source agency, they lose 70% of their budget. Okay? Sorry about that. These are, for a while now, I've been talking about information pathologies, and it was really 9/11 that turned me on to the total disconnect between what I thought was reality and what is actually reality. And these 10 books here, each extraordinary in its own way, and what they all boil down to is our information world is fiction. Intelligence is just corrupt, ignorant, and useless. The intelligence community, again, good people trapped in a bad system, except for the 10% that are doing great evil, including running guns, drugs, cash, gold, and small children. If the president wants to really, really hurt the deep state, he can put Mike Flynn in as Director of National Intelligence, reduce the entire IC by 70%, consolidate the pieces that a revitalized CIA, create the open source agency, and close every single military base around the world. That will immediately stop most of the trafficking in drugs, guns, gold, cash, and small children. Leadership, we don't have any. We're not holding anyone accountable. Great leaders integrate ethics, knowledge, intuition, and most of all, a stark, unshakable conviction that they exist to serve their stakeholders, their citizens, not the other way around. Anybody who can call us deplorables should not be in the running for President of the United States. There are no deplorables in the United States of America. There are only citizens, residents, and illegal aliens. Poverty is huge. We have slaves in the United States of America today. That first book documents the existing slave industry, including all of the slaves on these wide Florida plantations. People that are shot if they try and run away and buried, and nobody misses them. We have more blacks in prison today than there were black slaves before the Civil War. This is by design. Our white-collar middle class and our blue-collar class have collapsed. Our working poor are less than one paycheck away from disaster. Presidential policy matters. Law enforcement is not protecting the poor. In fact, law enforcement is preying on the poor in many places. And many of the poor are uneducated to the point of being dysfunctional. Again, education is root. There are those that believe that by the standards established by the Declaration of Independence, every state today has a right to secede from the Union. If you go back and read the Declaration of Independence, everything that applied then to King George applies today to King Trump. Not making this personal, but he is in charge of an abusive, predatory, dysfunctional federal government. And the governors and legislatures of the states have sold out. Did you know that 27 states have made it a felony to criticize Israel? 27 states have made it a felony to call for a boycott of Israel. Now, do you think that all those legislators, a majority in each of 27 houses, did that because it's a good idea? Or did they do that because they're being bribed and blackmailed, possibly with pedophilia tapes? Okay? This is what we're dealing with across this country, and the real meaning of Epstein is not that we got the Epstein cell, it's that there are 49 other networks just like Epstein. One in every state of the Union. That's a counterintelligence problem the FBI is complicit in allowing to occur. In fact, it's said that the CIA and the FBI are partners with the Mossad in these pedophilia tapes. I don't know myself, but I do know that we're not properly cleaning our own house. Secrecy is, of course, the absolute antithesis to democracy. It's now legal for the executive to lie to Congress and the public. Worse, this plague of secrecy has extended into the private sector. Many contracts and many of the so-called public information utilities that are used to judge stock value and so forth are now secret. Okay, so secrecy has become a way of avoiding the law and the rule of law. There are so many books here because I spend a lot of time thinking about strategy. Strategy is about ends, ways, and means. Let me just single out margin of victory. The president does bluster a great deal when he talks about the military. It's a false patriot who sings the praises of a Department of Defense that cannot win a war. Our Department of Defense is dysfunctional. It's 50% waste. We have too few aircraft. We lost 300 tanks by D-Day +3. We don't have that many tanks today. Okay? I mean, our aircraft were designed for aviation days that are warm and not humid. Our actual aviation day is hot and humid, which means they fly half as far, carry half as much, and loiter half as long. When I created the Marine Corps Intelligence Center, today a command, I did something called strategic generalizations. Average bridge loading distance is 30 tons. Why do we have a 70-ton monster that created the concept of gallons per mile? And oh, by the way, it's only useful in 6 countries where its line of sight distance range of 3,000 meters is good. Everywhere else, it's under 900 meters. There's no cross-country mobility, so why do all our military vehicles have wheels instead of tracks? Okay? What we have is this massive system for transferring wealth from the individual taxpayer to the banks through the military-industrial complex. This is just flat out wrong. And by the way, if President Trump cancels the federal income tax, I will expect all Democrats to send me $1. True cost economics. This is huge. I mean, I could spend the rest of my life doing this to good effect. The president has a sense of this. We've spent $7 trillion in the Middle East. We have nothing to show for it as a country. The banks in Israel got the $7 trillion. Okay? This is just wrong. General Smedley Butler, at the time the most decorated general in Marine Corps history, said, "War is a racket." It is. War is a racket. It costs a lot less to make peace. One of the reasons the bankers hate peace is because not only does it create more wealth, that wealth is distributed, not concentrated. Okay, so hold that concept. You create 10 times more wealth, but it's distributed, not concentrated. That's why war is a racket. Now, there's some big things that are going to be happening. I'm under a non-disclosure agreement, but let me just say that I believe that 22 million veterans are going to be part of a military political action committee within 30 to 60 days that is going to end U.S. wars overseas. This is my last cluster slide. I've been saving it for my Democratic friends, the Trump slide. There are 30 towns in Texas that are running out of water. We've been dropping the aquifers by 1 to 10 meters a year. And fracking is poisoning what's left. Okay? This is all insane. Against the top 3 threats to humanity, poverty, infectious disease, and environmental degradation, water, clean drinkable water is the key remediation factor. John was talking, and I agree with John. I want to be as bald as he is one day because it's more elegant. But I think of him as my elder brother in some ways. And he's right. We are going to see changes like you cannot begin to imagine, nor can I. And I think among them will be free energy and unlimited clean drinkable water refilling the aquifers, as well as an end to Monsanto. And now, for all of you who love the orange one, I think he is the chosen one. Not in the biblical sense, but in a sense of having been chosen by an ethereal complexity of forces to lead the Second American Revolution, one that seeks to restore the Constitution and our values. All this impeachment crap over nothing? What's really going on here is, do we want the Constitution, the family, the community, man, woman, marriage, and values back in America? Or do we want pedophilia, bestiality, transgenderism, and anything else goes? This is a cultural war. And most people don't get that. And Trump is not doing a good job of making that point. But this is a cultural war. This is a war about what kind of America do we want in the future. Do we want to be like California? Or do we want to be like, hard to pick. Let's go with North Dakota, okay? North Dakota owns its own oil and gas. It's got its own banks. Doesn't owe anybody any money, okay? That's why we destroyed Libya, because they wouldn't give France a deal, and France bribed Hillary Clinton to let us destroy Libya, so Hillary got the gold. Okay? Libya at one time had more oil, gold, and water, and was planning to basically make Africa independent and put it on a new gold standard and not have a central bank. And oh, by the way, we always make war against countries that don't have a central bank controlled by the Rothschilds. Okay? So there's some complexities here that I don't really fully understand, but this set of books, I've reviewed every single one of them. I think Kirshner is a clown prince who was born with a silver dildo up his ass. And Ivanka Trump takes bimbo to a new level. However, in fairness to the president, maybe he needed a Kushner to distract Netanyahu. I predict that Kushner will leave the White House soon to go to the campaign and never return. Unwanted Ivanka will start addressing women's groups in Kansas, and maybe, perhaps, the president will get back on track in talking to and listening to America. My bottom line on Donald Trump is that even if he were the worst asshole in the world, he's better than the other alternative. Okay? Because that was, ask me in the Q&A, that was the alternative. Okay? Under Obama, we've had more war, more false flag operations, more active shooters, and oh, by the way, the media never reports black-on-black shootings, and it doesn't report the fact that the cops have killed more people than we have. Over 4,000 people have been killed by the cops, including a woman who drew her gun when a cop was doing a peeping Tom on her house because it was reported that the door was open. What kind of bullshit is this? Okay, big picture, everything's energy, Satan is real, data and electronic spectrum are core. You can read this later. How does evil rule? It rules by controlling information, controlling perception, and controlling behavior. The good news is we're all a bunch of undisciplined assholes that can't be controlled. And I think we're about to take back the power. What can the president do about it? And I would be making the same exact presentation if Hillary Clinton were president, except I'd probably be dead, or in Guantanamo, right next to Obama. He can liberate information. We need a Web 3.0. We need a truth channel that cannot be censored. We need an open source agency. I was briefing Pat Roberts. Dave Boren wrote the foreword to my first book. Pat Roberts wrote the foreword to my second book. And so I did a return visit to Roberts' office. I was talking to the top national security advisor for Pat Roberts and pitching the open source agency to be based in Kansas, and he would get that as his retirement job. And she asked me point blank, he said, what's the mission of this agency? I said, to tell the truth about everything. She literally got up and walked out the door. Nobody in Washington wants us to tell the truth about everything. And that's what needs to change. Liberate perception. I mean, we need to do full disclosure on 9/11 and on Epstein. That will terminate the Zionist parasite in the United States of America. Then we can go after the Mormons and the Vatican. Because I'm not picking on the Zionists. They just happen to be the top of the list. Okay? All of these various organizations are doing harm to America. And I mean, pedophilia, as chief counsel, I have to emphasize that while the Catholics may be the worst at it, the Zionists, the Muslims, the Presbyterians, everybody else is into this also. It has become, adrenochrome, tortured blood, has become the drug of choice for the elite. And if you want to understand adrenochrome, just think of the Chinese boiling a dog to death to eat. What that torturing of the dog is doing is flushing the blood of the dog with adrenaline, which then changes the flavor of the meat. Just picture that being done to children on a regular basis. And then, of course, moralized behavior. You know, I'm no saint by any stretch of the imagination. Greatest president, this is the White House as I would organize it. And I'm going to go through this really quickly. Bottom line here is I think Donald Trump Jr. actually has potential in 2024, but so does Cynthia McKinney and one or two other wild cards. And I think the team in 2024 that can win is the team that brings together everybody, which is to say a coalition cabinet with a balanced budget and 7 absolute core promises, including closing every military base overseas, terminating all of the underground facilities, and terminating the federal income tax and a few other things. That's my other briefing, Steele-DD 2019. And I have some other slides that I'm just going to flash through. Oh, this one's fun. Watch for me, John McAfee, Cynthia McKinney, and Jesse Ventura to do something interesting in the next 120 days. And when we do that, it's not going to be to displace Donald Trump. It's going to be to force Donald Trump to consider #OnRig as the way in which he gets the independents, libertarians, and Greens, and #walkaways and Tea Party back into the game. I am not about Donald Trump. I'm about #OnRig for everybody. So don't get confused on that point. All right, so these graphics I'm not going to go over. This is the last one. There are 12 different things that have to happen for us to have an honest government. And this slide on the left is the one that shows you that today America is governed by a two-party tyranny elected by 30% of the voters. All right, that's it. I'm done. Now I think you get a break, and then we'll do Q&A. Are we good? All right, the clean version of Robert David Steele will now start. It's over. Next question. Well, there was a lady over there someplace. That's no lady, that's my wife. Okay, in the back. You start it out.
Are you going for the presidential bid in 2024?
The short answer is yes. The long answer is I would much rather be director of the open source agency and support whoever is elected president. Contingent on #unrig being implemented in time for America to elect a president that actually represents all Americans. Right now we have a president who was elected accidentally and who represents 13% of the voters, 1/2 of whom are total morons. And so we really have some big challenges here. I think #unrig and an open source agency and Web 3.0 are how I was meant to serve. And I think a national tour that causes people to think, and by the way, if I did this national tour, which would include people like Cynthia McKinney and Jesse Ventura, I'd also have 2 clowns. One clown would represent Donald Trump, and the other one would represent Bernie Sanders and Ocasio-Cortez and Nancy Pelosi. And we would literally make it funny to learn. What?
That's 4 clowns.
What's your point? So bottom line, look, I ran for president in 2012. I was one of 3 candidates accepted by the Reform Party to run. And I bowed out fairly quickly, among other things because I didn't want to get into reporting. I wasn't raising money. And Andre Barnett, the black gay bodybuilder, whom I respect and I'm still in touch with, had done his homework. And he had basically all the libertarians lined up across the country. I consider the Libertarian Party leadership to be totally corrupt. I tried to get the Libertarians and the Greens to run a joint ticket for 2016. They might actually have won under the circumstances because the Libertarians have the capacity to get someone on every single state ballot, which is an extraordinary achievement. But the Libertarians refused to consider a Green vice president. And I think they lost a major opportunity there. By the way, look for the League of Women Voters to get the presidential debates back. I'm working on that. The League of Women Voters lost the presidential debates to the 2-party tyranny, which created the Presidential Commission, because the League of Women Voters had the temerity to put independent and small party people on stage and to not provide the questions in advance. Okay? So if Donald Trump wants to make some points with educated women, as I have told him through his White House line and Tucker Carlson, all he has to do is say, I will not participate in a presidential debate unless it returns to the League of Women Voters, and bango. That's a hottie. Okay, I can't see hands, but over here, yes.
Could you please touch on the upcoming economic reset?
Global currency reset.
Yes, and what we need to do to get ready.
Move to West Virginia.
We did.
Yeah, I know. There's the global currency reset can be looked at 3 levels. And if you go to phi-beta-iota.net and look up an article called Reflections on the American Revolution, end notes 40 through 45 answer your question. I will give you a brief answer now. There is a long-running internet scam on how if you buy Zimbabwe currency, it will be redeemed at face value. And so something that's worth $1 and says 1 trillion Zim will become 1 trillion US dollars at some near date. I don't think that's true. There is a normal political thing going on in which Dr. Judy Shelton, who has long advocated gold-backed currency, is working for Donald Trump. And I believe that the president has been actively working with Xi and Putin and others to eliminate the SWIFT system. And this happened in part because the Russians and the Chinese created an alternative to the SWIFT system and an alternative to the World Bank and so forth. And so I think we are going to see asset-backed US currency before Christmas. I think we will see a student debt jubilee. I don't know if we'll see the end of the income tax before the second term, but I think that's coming. It's also questionable as to whether the 16th and 17th Amendments were ever properly ratified. if President Trump wants to actually have someone study that, he may end up finding that they were never properly ratified, which is how he immediately nationalizes the Federal Reserve and ends the income tax. And the income tax, if you replace the income tax with an automated payment transaction tax, that shifts the burden from the tiny segment of taxpayers today, basically wage earners, to include currency and stock transactions and all corporate supply chain transactions, all of which are tax-free today. It basically increases by a factor of 5 to 10 the amount of money that is legally, ethically available for the public good. Then there's a third level, which is the so-called elders. And supposedly, and I don't know them personally, but I know people who claim they know them and I believe them, there is the gold-backed Chinese money and the real estate-backed Russian elders. And then there's some other elders in the Amazon, I mean in South America and elsewhere, Indonesia. What I have seen in the past 2 years is a remarkable coming together of historical, religious, and royal leaders. We're talking like sultans in Indonesian islands. We're talking about American indigenous Indians. We're talking about indigenous leaders in India and elsewhere. And what I've started to see is kind of this return to Mother Earth leadership. And I don't understand it myself. But I think that if you consider, I mean, I'm quite sure that Rothschild understands that President Trump can have him killed. And that the Secret Service is no longer the disloyal sacks of shit that they were when John F. Kennedy was assassinated, because the Secret Service made Kennedy's assassination possible. Trump appears to be very well protected. One of the things we've discovered is that 70% of the wealth of the 1% is not documented. It's not tied to tangible assets. I mean, the Koch brothers are making $3 million every minute in interest, okay? And by the way, the proper pronunciation is Koch brothers, okay? So, what you really want to, I'm sorry, it's West Virginia just brings out my better angels. Loving every minute. What I think you're seeing here is an end to fictitious digital wealth and an end to wealth that is based on bribery and blackmail. It's not over by a long shot. It's going to take another quarter century. But I would say that, you know, Trump is the guy you send through the door to get shot so the rest of you can come through. And he's doing that. I think that for all of his evils and whatever you may want to say about him, I mean, look, this is a guy, I don't think he's a pedophile. He's shown a predilection for aging porn stars, okay? This is a guy that has issues, even though he's married to one of the most beautiful, elegant women in the world who rivals Jackie Kennedy, if not eclipses her. I think he's some kind of miracle. And miracles do come in ugly forms. So look at me. So my bottom line is, yes, I think there's a global currency reset happening. I think power is going to return to localities. A mayor in Ecuador was just dragged behind a truck for failing to keep his promises. You will recall my book, Power to the Powerless. I think we're going to start seeing more townships and counties say no to higher authority. Now, what needs to change is we need to get off this federal tit, okay? Because the problem we've got right now is the federal government is buying compliance at the state and local level, and unfortunately the federal government, as owned and operated by the Zionists, is buying academic corruption, and it's buying police corruption, and it's buying legislative corruption, and it's allowing commercial corruption. And it's all because, you know, I have this True Cost Economics app. It's easy to build an app. It's much harder to get the data to run the app. But imagine an app on your smartphone, and Wired Magazine had an article to this effect, which you pointed at a product and your phone says, if you eat me, I'll kill you, okay? So imagine an app that you can point at any barcode and it tells you how much water is in that product, how much fuel was used to create that product across the entire supply chain, how many toxins were expelled into the atmosphere, how many children died of leukemia for that product to come to market, how much taxation and regulatory avoidance does that product have? So you have like 7 little circles that can be green, yellow, or red. In the Marine Corps, I learned my generals understood 3 colors, green, yellow, and red. I mean, really, I used to write 10-page memos and they'd throw them away, and then one day I put a green, yellow, and red thing in the middle of page 1, and my general went nuts over the red circle. He said, Steele, what the fuck's this red circle? How do I get rid of it? Now I had his attention, okay? So he understood 3 colors. So anyway, I think we're getting to a point now where people are going to start saying no, and localization is a huge part of that. We also need to take our police forces back. Any police chief that accepts military weapons or bribes to take military weapons should be fired. We should not have SWAT teams. They should be in the National Guard, and they should only be called out on order of the governor. I mean, it used to be that 2 cops could arrest anybody. Now they send a SWAT team, kill everybody, and then apologize because it's the wrong address. Okay? I mean, it's just, country's gone nuts. Another, yes, over here.
Is crypto real or?
There's 2 answers to that question. Actually, 3.
Say the question.
Is crypto real? The short answer is yes. The bad news is that NSA has been keeping every crypto message ever written in the past 15 years, and now quantum computing is making it possible to decrypt all those previously safe encrypted messages. Okay? Second, Bitcoin. I personally know a number of people that are moving out of Bitcoin and into gold and silver. I personally know people who are farming Bitcoin. China's got the biggest farmer. My understanding is that Bitcoin is being pumped by 3 to 5 major institutional owners. I would not trust Bitcoin, even though John McAfee has said he will eat his dick if it doesn't reach $1 million by December. I've bought my plane ticket. So I think Bitcoin makes me nervous. And one of the things, I'll come to you, sir, you next and then you, sir. Bitcoin, let me put it this way. We don't have an honest information ecology. We don't have an information ecology that can be trusted, that's sustainable, that can be audited. All of these algorithms are out of control. I mean, I'm the guy, I wrote the original letter to the White House in 1994. You can look it up at phibetaiota.net. Just look for 1994 sounding the alarm. I wrote the original letter telling the White House it needed to spend $1 billion in 1994 dollars in order to start getting ready for the cyber era. The CIA built the artificial intelligence staff around me, okay? And I mean, I would be wealthy beyond my dreams if I'd been willing to eat shit and stay in my cubicle. But the bottom line here is that all of this stuff is like a fishnet. In fact, my most famous quote for PBS when I opened Hackers on Planet Earth, they said, well, are you telling us that cyberspace is like a house with unlocked windows and doors? I said, no. I'm telling you, cyberspace is like a gauze tent surrounded by drunken teenagers all carrying lit blowtorches. Okay? That's what we've got. All right, over here, sir, and then I'll come back to you, sir.
Question on, the current decision, Trump's decision to withdraw
From Syria.
Yeah. How do you see that playing out in the long run? It looks to me like everything's going to become unglued over it. I mean, it's going to take a long time.
Okay. The question is Trump withdrawing from Syria? Number one, it was a campaign promise. Number two, 22 million veterans, including Tulsi Gabbard, want that. Number three, the smallest number of Kurds on the planet is in Syria. Okay? Number four, he only pulled 50 people back. Number five, Turkey is a NATO ally. Number six, the Kurds are being trained, equipped, and organized by the Zionists to harass and commit sedition in every country they're in, including Iran, Iraq, Syria, and Turkey. Okay, the Kurds are basically a Zionist paramilitary. And until people understand that, they're not going to understand that however righteous the Kurds' original concept for Kurdistan might be, There are 5,000 secessionist movements across the world, 27 in the USA. I mean, Sarah Palin really missed a chance to take Alaska independent. That would be really cool, because then Alaska would be its own republic with its own oil and heads up on the Arctic. So bottom line here is no American should die for a Kurd. No American should die for an Israeli. And no American should pay a single dime to put 44 military bases around Iran, which is the adult in the region. Okay, I went to school with Iranian engineers at Lehigh University. These are smart, ethical people. And everything we're being told about Iran is a lie. I mean, the last round of lies was Netanyahu asking us to believe that the Iranian nuclear program was in an old warehouse with no fences. Okay? And that he managed to get in there and steal their secrets. Okay? I mean, this is just the ability of Americans to believe absolute bullshit is just beyond my comprehension. Trump is absolutely right to be getting us out of the Middle East. And we can't stop there. We need to close the 44 bases around Iran, because those bases are used by CIA and Israel and others for bad things. Dynacor is smuggling children. Cynthia McKinney tore Dynacor, a new asshole, was explained to me, it's a prison term. Cynthia McKinney really roughed up Donald Rumsfeld on Dynacor using US military aircraft to smuggle children. Okay, Dynacor, which by the way, Steve Feldman or whatever his name is, it's the head of the President's Foreign Intelligence Advisory Group. He is a world-class Zionist who is using Dynacor as a paramilitary element inside of the United States. Okay, so I am hoping that Donald Trump is one day going to have someone like Mike Flynn as a intelligence and counterintelligence advisor. My recommendations for the White House include abolishing the National Security Council. That's how the deep state controls the information. The president is being lied to every single day. All right. I would replace that with a strategy advisory group, perhaps led by General Tony Zinni, whose book The Battle for Peace I recommend very highly, including Doug McGregor, himself a candidate for National Security Advisor. He's the colonel who's pointed out that we win or lose wars 20 years before the war starts. The decisions you make today determine whether you will win tomorrow, and I guarantee you we will win the next war we will lose the next war against Russia or China, because we don't have enough sustainable aircraft, we don't have tracks, and we have one contractor per laptop. This is not how you win wars. Okay? So we're out of Schlitz. We need to pull everybody back. We need to bring our troops and their wallets home to mama. And we need to close all those bases, and we need to build a very strong military that can launch from the United States of America. Now, I'm not familiar with what we have in the way of satellite precision munitions and lasers and all that. I am very worried about the cluttering up of space. I think this Musk fellow, or whatever he is about to put in more space garbage. I don't think we're properly evaluating the electromagnetic pollution from the street level to the space level. So we need an open source agency. And last but not least, I'd throw the media scum out of the White House. Why are we wasting real estate paid for by the taxpayer on shitheads that can't tell the truth? So I would turn that into a Trump studio and a truth channel. And I would give Trump the ability, and this would be on an opt-in basis, every single person in the United States of America with a social security number would be given an opportunity to opt out of a daily presidential email or text. And if they stay in, they have the opportunity to vote on any issue that Trump sends out for a vote. And they have an opportunity to weigh in on any issue, so that the president has a dashboard where he can see how America is thinking and feeling by demographic, by location, and by issue. That's how you connect the president to the public. Okay. In the back, sir. All right, the question is, do I have any sources I can offer that can be put online to help people get free energy? The short answer is no. I do know of 2 free energies that are being tested in labs in Switzerland, and that may be brought to market soon. And when I say brought to market soon, what that means is you buy something that then creates free energy indefinitely. I personally think that getting off the grid is how you go. And take Florida, for example. It's illegal to live off the grid in Florida. You're not allowed to be totally disconnected from the grid. Even if you have solar power that meets all your needs, you're required to be connected to the grid. I think we need to move toward localization. We have at Phi Beta Iota, I have a guy that does a weekly American Gray Swans report. And it talks about all the bad things that could happen that could basically cut you off from food and medicine and so forth. And what he basically says is because we're rooted in a just-in-time system, we have to plan for the day when we run out of food in 2 weeks. Again, localization. So for me, localization is about rejecting them carpetbaggers and creating your own sources of food and water and medicine and so forth. And that requires a robust information sharing network, which requires a robust community trust platform, which requires that you talk to one another. So I don't have an answer for you, but I think, and free energy basically means pulling energy out of the atmosphere. And if you look at the Tesla stuff, it uses the Earth as one conductor. There's some problems with the Tesla stuff because if you use the Earth as a conductor, it's very possible that the right Tesla combination here can cause a nuclear explosion in Russia. I mean, there's really some very serious work that's being done on the threat of Tesla not being properly understood by the Texans that are building it and then doing stuff. But for me, a lot of energy is about conserving energy and not using energy. And in fact, there's some ways. I was lecturing in Ecuador, and their highest priority is free energy. And one of the things they've discovered is that they can keep food cool with certain kinds of light spectrums and not use electrical power. So conserving energy, not using energy, and so forth is part of the solution. But I'm an old dumbass. I really think America's a great country, and we have a right to expect an honest government that actually works for, of, by the people. And so I'm going to continue to focus on #unrig. I am not going to worry about the end of the world. If the world does end, I'll go sailing. Over here, ma'am. Everyone gets a question before a second question. Yeah.
I'm curious about the moon. What do you know about the moon and the technology on the moon, and does it control us?
Jeffrey Epstein is on the moon in the presidential suite. It's hollow. It's got a city inside of it. And I don't know anything, okay? But I've been briefed by NASA PhDs and I've read books. And, have you ever seen something that doesn't rotate? Have you ever seen something that has a big hollow bang when something hits it, which NASA is on record as saying that they slammed something into the moon and it went boom, 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 okay? We have astronauts who have talked about the structures they've seen on the moon, Buzz Aldrin in particular. The moon, again, read David Icke and Farrell and others. Apparently Saturn was our sun long, long ago. And then Saturn blew out and we got our current sun, and there are things I don't understand. But I'm absolutely convinced that the moon is some form of artificial craft, even if it's an asteroid that's been moved into position. It also apparently introduced tides and really bad weather on the Earth. And so the moon has a negative impact on the Earth. I don't know enough about it. I would like to have a government that tells me the truth as it knows it about the moon. I would like to have a government that does not try to conceal extraterrestrial technologies, threats, goods, whatever. My bottom line is I never thought about the moon until about 5 years ago. And about 5 years ago, I started realizing I'm not being told the truth. I don't know what the truth is, but I know I'm not being told the truth.
David Icke, particularly.
He's very good. Over here,
What's your opinion of the cube?
Q. I think Mike Flynn's a great guy. I think Q is about 5 people. By the way, I don't know if you've all noticed, but Pottinger is still in the National Security Council of the White House. Pottinger is the guy who co-authored Fixing Intelligence with Mike Flynn. Mike Flynn is coming back. And I think he would be a great director of national intelligence. I mean, I want to be there to sweep up the blood. This is, heads need to roll in a very soft and gentle manner. Q has been really, really interesting. And you'll notice that Q said Zionists last. By the way, today is 10/19/2019. Has anyone noticed that? It's a very auspicious day. Well, yes, we're here. We're here. We're speaking truth to power. So Q is a useful experiment, and it doesn't go far enough. I have a real problem with Brad Parscale and Joshua, what's his name? Kushner. Has anyone read the Kushner book? Greed or whatever? This is a very bad boy. I mean, he should be in jail. He's taken $1 billion bribe from Qatar. He may have been intimate with Saudi princes. His father is believed to have been intimate with Cory Booker in stairwells in New Jersey. His father, a felon, has participated in all of Kushner's real estate deals, despite the law that says he's not allowed to. You know, I'm not sure where Trump's head was when he and by the way, I think Kushner, I think Ivanka and Chelsea were both profiled by Ghislaine Maxwell for the Mossad, and a series of Jewish boyfriends were run in front of them. Ivanka failed the Rothschild test, but she ended up accepting Kushner. And there are apparently chemical means of ensuring affection and love and all this other stuff. If you look at intermarriage, particularly the British, one of the reasons I say we lost 1776, not only did we lose to the Freemasons, but the Zionists basically intermarried to the point that there is no distinction between the British elite and the Zionist war machine. Okay, they basically own everybody, including the Queen, through intermarriage and other financial deals. Never mind whatever satanic pedophilia entrapment stuff you've got going. Just intermarriage and financial is bad. America basically needs to put all minds in touch with all information all the time. I mean, that's my answer. And I think that's why, and the other epiphany that I came to, and that blue circle is my life's work in one slide, is that education, intelligence, and research all have to be managed by the same person. They all have to be brought together. Because intelligence is remedial education for leaders who have gotten into power without knowing what they need to know. And research is how you translate education and intelligence into prosperity and peace. Research should not be so much about how do you kill other people and waste money for profit. Okay? So education, intelligence, research all need to be brought together. So Q for me is a lifeboat in a raging sea. But we need a I was going to say Titanic. We need a big ship. Okay, wait. Who did we have over here? I'm lost. Okay. Neither one of you. Over here?
DOJ and Barr.
Well, Barr. The question is, what do I think about the Department of Justice and William Barr? I think Trump hired Barr for two reasons. One, as a sop to the Bush crime family. And two, because Barr was very, very good at getting everyone off under the Reagan-Iran-Contra era. And so I think the president was planning ahead to being able to do pardons if he needed to do pardons. Sidney Powell has written the definitive book on Department of Justice corruption under the Obama administration, as well as under the Bush and Cheney administration, but she focuses on the Enron cases and stuff. The bottom line here is that the FBI, the CIA, the Department of Justice all lie, cheat, and steal and screw American citizens with impunity. And that needs to stop. So from where I sit, Barr has prospects. I wasn't pleased with Jefferson Sessions being fired, but I also wasn't pleased with Jefferson Sessions recusing himself. He should have recognized the Russian witch hunt for what it was. By the way, Bill Binney and I both called the Russian witch hunt on day one. And Bill is providing official testimony on how the DNC hack was an insider downloading at speeds that could only be achieved by a flash drive. And the actual numbering of each message demonstrates that, okay? All of this is just completely nonsense. And for the president to ask the Ukrainian president about CrowdStrike tells me that President Trump is not getting properly briefed. By the way, Trump told Pompeo to talk to Binney, my friend. Pompeo talked to Binney and blew Binney off. Pompeo decided to go with the liars at the CIA rather than Bill Binney, okay? Which is why I think Pompeo should be fired. John Huntsman would be my choice for Secretary of State. John Huntsman is unique for having been ambassador to China and Russia. And he's a Mormon offset to Mitch Romney. And he's central casting ready, as the president likes to say. Yes, ma'am.
Erdogan's coup 3 years ago, do you think that was something he did for himself? Or do you think it was an actual coup and his backing off of a lot of democratic freedoms within Turkey?
I have no direct knowledge to that. My impression at the time was that he orchestrated that himself. He used that to clean house.
Say what you're talking about.
Erdogan's coup, the coup in Turkey, was that organized by him or was that a real coup? And I said, I think it was something he organized to clean house. Look, one of the problems is as long as we have homeless people and as long as we have blacks in prison and as long as we have corrupt prosecutors and judges, we've got no business screwing with other countries. And I think Judge Napolitano and George Will have written excellent books. We need to get out of being, and we're not really the world's policeman, we're more like the world's enforcer for the banks. And we're creating chaos and havoc, and this is all wrong. Yes, sir.
Yeah,
And then you, sir.
we're poisoning our next generation of children with all the vaccine damages. We've got more gallons. We're getting crop dusted for how many years? Why?
The question is a very good one. It's asking about the poisoning of our children, vaccines, and so forth. I think the answer is twofold. Number one, vaccines are a profit center. I consider the Center for Disease Control to be a criminal network. I consider the Center for Disease Control to be completely unethical, anti-American, totally corrupt, worthy of indictment at every level. The vaccine court is unconstitutional. And every agreement that you sign that precludes a jury trial is unconstitutional. So the first reason is vaccines and disease and illness are a profit center. I mean, the autism rates that have gone up since vaccinations. I mean, back in the 50s, we used to have parties for mumps.
Yeah.
Get mumps? Oh boy, let's have a party. Okay, everybody come get the mumps. And then it's over with. All right, that's a good common sense solution. The second reason, and I've got a post that you might like reading at Phi Beta Iota by Dr. Richard Sauter. He talks about the deep underground bases, but he also talks about a malevolent artificial intelligence, stellar civilization, that is basically seeking to eradicate everything that has a soul, everything that has a human aspect to it. This is way beyond any possible understanding by me. But I do believe that there is not only a cultural war between humans on Earth in America, there is also some kind of interstellar galactic conflict. And from where I sit, humans are an experiment in seeing how free will and imagination might work out. And we were failing until recently. Now I think we're starting to pass. Yes, John?
You skipped talking about the Tavistock Institute. Would you say a little bit about that?
Tavistock?
Mm-hmm. Yeah, you missed it. Anyway.
Well, John wants me to talk a little bit about the book Tavistock. What the book Tavistock does, and David Icke also covers this ground, but Tavistock is focused on the CIA, MI6, and the Tavistock Institute, and the manner in which essentially the British have been running the U.S. intelligence services. And I don't know if you've noticed this, but everybody who becomes a director of operations at CIA must have first served as Chief of Station London. Okay? And from where I sit, Tavistock opened my mind. I already knew that CIA was created by Wall Street for Wall Street, but I didn't understand the degree to which CIA was active within the United States of America, doing really, really terrible things to the American people, corrupting judges, corrupting prosecutors, and and basically treating us the way they would treat any other foreign country as an operations area. Now, I never saw any of that when I was a clandestine case officer. I was blessed. I had 3 back-to-back tours overseas. I had only 3 short headquarters tours, and I, in fact, refused a job on covert action staff, and I refused it because I signed up to steal truth for my country, not tell lies for my country. And that was just a gut instinct, and it's only now that I realize how wise I was to refuse that job. There is no, I mean, I have a saying, the truth at any cost lowers all other costs. Now, Bill Casey, my friend Barbara Honegger, who contributed a portion of my 9/11 book, she was in the room with Ronald Reagan, who asked Bill Casey, how will we know when CIA has succeeded? And she says that Bill Casey said, Mr. President, we will know that CIA has succeeded when everything American believes is a lie. Okay? I mean, I'm just stunned. And, you know, I got to say, I don't think Gina Haspel has a clue what's going on in the lower depths of CIA. I think that there are, and this is similar to the secret space program, I think that there are industry-run operations that basically utilize CIA insiders and Secret Service and FBI insiders and others to do really bad things, and politicians are treated as transients who are not briefed. And I personally don't think the director of CIA has a clue as to all of the really, and this is a woman who ran a torture center. Okay, now I happen to like Gina. I think she had to eat a lot of shit to get to be director of Central Intelligence. Our boys at CIA are very, very bad boys. They're allowed to whore. We're immensely proud of having the highest rates of adultery, alcoholism, divorce, and suicide. Okay, higher than anybody on the planet. There are good reasons for that, but Gina had to do very well and put up with a lot to get all the way to the top. And I think running a torture center was part of paying dues in a very bad club. But I don't think she's got a sense of it. All right, here, sir.
Is the Stars Academy a front organization to establish the narrative for the CIA?
I don't know, but I think so. The question was, is the truth to the Stars Academy a front for the CIA to establish the narrative? I said, I don't know, but I think so. You, sir.
Getting back to the British Crown again, some pundits out there have indicated on or about 1871 that the United States incurred this large debt, and the USA, as we think it is, was co-opted by the USA Corporation. Is there any truth to any of that?
I know Judge Anna von Wrights, and if you go to phi-beta-iota.net, you can see where I've been very respectful about her writings, and I published stuff on that. I myself do not know. I have a hard time dealing with the idea that we're all being monetized and that our birth certificates are some kind of stock certificate, whatever. I have a hard time seeing the gold fringe on the flag as anything other than ceremonial. Having said that, I will now say that in my view, before we ever think about China, Iran, or Russia as an enemy, we should think about Great Britain and Israel as an enemy first. Here, ma'am, and then you, sir.
Could you tell us about your book review process? Number one, do you use any speed reading technique?
Oh, no.
Number two, do you write your notes? And then number three, your recall is fabulous. Do you have memory techniques?
Okay. I'm actually an artificial intelligence clone. I was sent here from the planet Zorg, and I'm here to educate you. You will be assimilated. The question was about my book reading techniques and my recall and so forth. There is no substitute for a hard copy book in your hands that you can make notes in, period. I read books in one of three ways. The most important books that are immediately apparent as I go through them, I read the index first, and then I read all of the end notes, and then I read the book. The least important books, which are also easily apparent, I tend to skim. A lot of books I know enough so that I know what the book is going to say, and I'm just looking for what's new. And so some books I'll only read the introduction and the conclusion, and then if that piques my interest, I'll use the index to go pick up several other little pieces and so forth. I generally don't review books that I've read that don't rate 4 or 5 stars, okay? So there's a lot of reviews I haven't written. I write notes all over the book, and I select quotes, and then my summary review becomes my own memory aid. As far as memorization, I don't have a memory. I use Phi Beta Iota as my memory box. And so I post stuff there, and that's why I can look up a book and go back. This took 2 weeks of my life, okay? Because I actually had to go back and read 2,000 book reviews, and then I organized them into a table. And I remember one book review clearly that I almost shit with shame. The first line was, "Hillary Clinton is a goddess." Come on. Where was I? I was thinking of Hillary Clinton back in the day when she was clearly one of the most talented politicians of our time. You know, that's before Nancy Pelosi. Nancy Pelosi today is worth over $98 million after 30 years on a government salary. Oh, how did that happen? Turns out it's not illegal for Congress to do insider trading. Okay? So anyway, was there a question over here? Yes, sir. And then you, ma'am.
How vulnerable are we to a cyber attack? And I just want to say, I think that spending so much money on hardware, like in planes and ships and tanks, we're fighting the last war instead of the next one.
I agree. The question is, how vulnerable are we to a cyber attack? And isn't it silly to spend so much money on hardware when we're vulnerable to, for example, all of our geospatial satellites? Okay? I mean, literally, the Chinese, the Russians, and the Iranians can all turn off our mapping satellites. Okay? And I guarantee you, our officers are not trained in land navigation. In the Marine Corps, you don't graduate unless you pass a land navigation test using a map and a compass. At least that's the old Marine Corps. I don't know what it's like today. They probably have a contractor that carries the compass for you and whispers the answer into your ear. But anyway, I really urge you to read Margin of Victory. Doug McGregor is one of the most talented individuals we've got. And he basically points out we've got the wrong military. What we have is this stovepipe military of all these units, and then pieces of them come together at the last minute. What we really need is integrated reconnaissance strike combined arms brigades, where the same general commands his own air force, his own land force, and his own sea force. I cannot overstate the degree to which the U.S. government is a fraudulent financial Ponzi scheme that is designed to transfer wealth from the individual taxpayer to the military-industrial complex and then on to the banks. It's designed to give, I mean, when I was in the Marine Corps, the intelligence management position, which decided where to put people, was a GS-12 job. Today, it's an SES-4. It's like a 3-star general. Okay, I mean, the amount of grade inflation and the amount of budget inflation, and all of this is just totally insane. I'm quite confident we could reduce the federal government to 20 to 30% of its present size and be better off for it, even if we still had to pay the salaries of the individuals. Okay, a friend of mine, Del Spurlock, under Reagan, was Deputy Secretary of Labor, and he created a job retraining plan where we used underutilized military facilities and we literally retrained the entire population for 21st century jobs. I mean, this is the kind of big thinking that we need in the White House. And you're not getting it out of college. Kids are graduating from college not knowing anything. I mean, it's quite astonishing. Where was the next question? Over here?
Yes. When do you see this disclosure of ETs?
Of what?
ETs.
If I had to guess, I would say after Donald Trump gets reelected. And I mean, these California fires supposedly may have had some kind of ET connection. There may have been some kind of infestation, is that the word? That needed to be dealt with. Turning off the power was also allegedly a way to detect the underground tunnels with their own power grids. So if you turn off all the above ground power, then you can see. And there were apparently a lot of helicopters. I have no direct knowledge. I guess what I would say to you is read the two books that I suggested, or read my reviews of Project Human Extinction and Our Universal Journey. Both of those are free online. Make up your own mind. I am absolutely convinced in my own heart that there are anywhere from 26 to 2,600 stellar civilizations. We are not, by any stretch of the imagination, intelligent life in the larger scheme of things. And what we are is an interesting experiment in assholes that can think. You know. Hey, way in the back there.
Yeah, could you speak to the global collateral accounts and reptilians?
Global collateral accounts and reptilians. All right, I am told with assurance that the Queen is a reptilian. I don't know myself, but I've spoken to people who claim that Diana claimed that she saw the Queen and Prince Charles both have reptilian shapes. I don't know myself. As best I can tell, the narrative, which I have no direct knowledge of, has evil reptilians going back to the Mayans and the Aztecs, getting people hooked on adrenochrome and using priests and secret societies and then bankers as control mechanisms. And Earth has basically been mined. It's been mined for gold and it's been mined for humans. I really don't know. What was the other half of the reptilian thing?
Global collateral accounts.
Global collateral accounts. I know people who know people, but I don't know anything myself. What I'm absolutely certain of is that there is more than enough wealth on this planet to make every single person on the planet a millionaire with a millionaire's quality of life. And that doesn't exist because all of that wealth is being concentrated and diverted and polluted. And so our shared mission is to basically take control, not just take control of the earth back, but to heal the earth. I wrote, one of my best pieces was written for a conference in Berlin that I ended up not going to. I will never visit Germany again. It's an insane country. It's totally out of control. If you so much as question the Holocaust in Germany, you're arrested. Never mind the fact that the Holocaust has been completely discredited. People died, but not the way they say they did. So I've written an article which you can find. By the way, my personal blog or my personal website is robertdavidsteele.com. And you can find some of my best publications on the front page, and then you can see everything I've ever written and all of my interviews that haven't been deleted by YouTube there. And one of the things I've written, one of my latest pieces is Healing the Self, Healing the Earth. And that captures a lot of my views on where we're going. One other thing. Are you the only person of color in this room? We got any more? All right, you and me, we'll take them all on. Dr. Randy Short in Washington, D.C. is a friend of mine. And we were talking about American blacks and fake blacks. And we were specifically talking about Kamala Harris, who is an absolute Jamaican bitch of a prosecutor, who will do anything to screw over people to advance herself. And Randy told me, and I was stunned by this, because even though I'm friends with Cynthia McKinney, I mean, she tolerates me. But Randy said, you know what? Trump gave me my America back. He gave me a sense that he actually cares about those of us that were here first. And that includes Indians and blacks and whites. And by the way, I don't know if any of you noticed the book on white trash. You're all descended from white trash, okay? As am I. It's a great book. I mean, really, the America was founded by riffraff run and owned by Freemasons, okay? So, I mean, when you get back into people's history of the United States and all of this stuff, it totally opens your mind. And I suspect that the elite boarding schools are teaching this kind of stuff. I think our elites are getting a better education than we are. And I really have a problem with private schools, because essentially every private school that jumps up, like Flint Hill and Oakton, means that the public school is moving down. And this is not good. There was another question over here. Yes, sir.
What are your feelings on the thought that the CERN is possibly opening a portal into another dimension?
That who is opening a portal? Oh, yeah, that's a really important question. I would shut them down. I would absolutely shut CERN down. We're playing with shit we don't understand. And actually, let me say a couple things. One, I have talked to someone who claims to be part of a U.S. government program that until 2012 had wormholes and portals that were in operation. And people were, in fact, going to Mars and other places quick time. Okay, I have no reason to doubt that officer's integrity. Number two, like the U.S. nuclear industry, like CERN, like other things, most of this stuff, including most science, is just a spending scam. It's there to spend money. It's not there to actually reach worthwhile decisions. Number three, and I have no direct knowledge, but I've read enough and talked to enough people, I believe that our nuclear capabilities have been completely neutralized, which is why I think there will be no nuclear war between Iran and Saudi Arabia, or Iran and Israel, or between India and Pakistan. Well, among other things, if you read William Tompkins' book, Selected by Extraterrestrials, he talks about early tests in which every time they went to fire an intercontinental rocket, it suddenly had pinholes all over its skin. Boom. That rocket was completely neutralized. And I don't know myself, but I think that there is every reason to believe that nuclear power is so out of control that some higher intelligence felt they had to control it. They had to quarantine us.
I believe that.
Yeah, and I do too. And that's it's an important opinion to have, because if you have that opinion, Netanyahu becomes the world's, by the way, Netanyahu was like a furniture salesman until he was promoted to be the face of Israel. If you hold that opinion, then Netanyahu is a world-class nuclear war scam artist. And all of this fear-mongering is absolutely wrong. And by the way, Golan should go back to Syria, and we should stop genociding the Palestinians. And how come they can have a wall but we can't? Have you guys seen the pictures of the Gestapo walls that Israel has? It's just an absolute outrage. And I think I had exchanges with Cynthia this morning and with several others. What's changed in the United States since 9/11 and Epstein is that the public is waking up to the Zionist parasite. They're also somewhat awake to the Vatican parasite, and they're only barely starting to get a sense of Mormon pedophilia. There's a Mormon sect that has been caught selling white babies, producing white babies, for sale to Turkey at $50,000 a head. Okay, that's been in the news. Yes, sir.
Can you just make a comment on why has George Soros been able to do all the things that he's doing that nobody's tried to stop him?
Because I wasn't president and didn't have him shot. It's a serious question. Why has George Soros been allowed to do everything he's been allowed to do? I believe that George W. Bush Sr. was part of the CIA team that assassinated John F. Kennedy. And that George Sr. was consequently rewarded over time with both positions at CIA, where he institutionalized CIA criminal activities that are completely unknown to the good people that work at CIA. Okay? And then he became president. I believe that Dick Cheney was the actual president under Doofus. I think young George Bush, by the way, there's an excellent book called The Bush Tragedy, in which the author makes the case that young Bush is a Walker, not a Bush. And he's always been the black sheep of the family. And I mean, he really took it in the teeth when Kay Hutchinson said, "George, you were born with a silver spoon in your mouth." I mean, this is a guy that is just sad. I think he actually has good intentions, but Dick Cheney is the most nakedly amoral person on the planet, and that even includes George Soros. George Soros is totally amoral. And part of the problem that we have, and there's an excellent Professor Epstein, no coincidence, no relation, There's a Professor Epstein that does some really excellent lectures on Roman law and natural law. Under Roman and natural law, intentions matter. Context matters. When Daniel Ellsberg was tried for the Pentagon Papers, the judge would not allow his intentions to be brought forth. Jim Fetzer just got a Stalinist show trial in Wisconsin over the Sandy Hook book because this guy, Leonard Posner, has been stalking people telling the truth about Sandy Hook. The truth about Sandy Hook is incontrovertible. It was a false flag operation. This judge, who is a Catholic, who may be a Freemason, who may be under pedophilia, entrapment, blackmail, basically issued a summary judgment against Fetzer. You're not allowed to do that if there are facts in dispute. Only a jury can determine facts in dispute. So this judge has been guilty of judicial malpractice here in multiple ways. So we're gearing up to take Fetzer to the Supreme Court because it's a First Amendment issue. It's a judicial malpractice issue, which Sidney and Matt Tabhi have written about. And I think the answer to your question is George Soros has gotten away with all of this because the law can be bought. We have sold the law. And where we need to get to is where we either have electoral reform or, and this is not what I want to see, people take justice into their own hands. George Soros should not be able to walk the streets in the United States of America or Poland or any other country that he's destroyed. So very quick.
I just want to ask you this because you mentioned Kennedy. Is John Kennedy Jr. dead?
Actually, I'm John F. Kennedy Jr. This is my disguise. And it's a very good disguise, and my wife is over there. Look, I don't know. When Kennedy supposedly was killed, I believed he was killed. I believed he was assassinated. The FBI was looking for some people. There were two guys in a fishing boat with what appears to be an electromagnetic pulse gun as the plane was making a final approach in perfect weather. And there was supposedly a whistle attached to the plane that was the sure indicator, although I don't know if that's true or not. 5 years ago, before Donald Trump, that's it. We're really in BT-AT time now. Before Donald Trump, I would never in a million years have considered the possibility that John F. Kennedy and his wife faked their death and that the civil lawsuit for wrongful death that the family won for the wife was part of the cover-up. AT, I'm now saying I'm suspending judgment. Anything is possible. So I don't know. Now, I will tell you that I anticipate the day when John F. Kennedy Sr. and Donald Trump are both added to Mount Rushmore. Over here. No one over here? Who hasn't asked the question? You haven't asked the
I was
question.
wondering if there's any techniques that you actually know of to get in touch with extraterrestrials.
I've been trying, and they keep blowing me off. I mean, I go to bed saying, "Hey, abduct me, assholes!" You're not good enough. So, I was invited to France to meet an extraterrestrial by someone I believe in. I walked away not convinced. I came away with the impression it was actually a Spanish professor looking for a grant. But everything I've read, and John's giving me the hook here, everything I've read suggests that they're here. I think abductions have happened. I think human trafficking has happened. And I also think that they have, in selective cases, made contributions to our science and technology. For example, Tompkins talks a lot in his book about how ideas came into his head. And he also talks about Nordic secretaries as their favorite cover. So my bottom line is I'm absolutely certain I'm not the smartest guy on the planet, and I'm absolutely certain we're not the smartest species in the galaxy. And therefore, there's probably someone laughing their ass off at us right now. So let me come back here and do one more question, the lady in the back, and then we'll stop, John.
I keep hearing about UN Agenda 21,
UN Agenda 21.
2030, and it's really scary. And I believe it's moving in.
Go louder, please.
I believe well, you can talk about carpetbaggers in Florida, and, you know, people are being trained to talk communities into trying to give us a problem.
Yeah, well, actually, Soros is in the process right now of bribing county level officials. Okay. I'm waiting for Trump to make his move. And there were rumors that General Milley coming in was the beginning of military tribunals and arrests and so forth. I think most of the sealed indictments are there simply as pressure points. The sealed indictments are there to keep 95% of the deep state quiet while we deal with the other 5%. I consider the United Nations to be a totally corrupt enterprise. The specialized agencies do not respond to the Secretary General's direction. Not only do I want to throw the press out of the White House, I want to throw the United Nations out of the United States. I can put that real estate to better use. I also want the U.S. out of NATO. And I believe that we need to focus, you know, if you listen to Trump's speech at the United Nations, the focus on citizens, there's something there. I mean, orange baboon or not, it's a pretty smart baboon, okay? I mean, there's something there. And so John is telling me that my time is up. And I will just tell you, I have 3 websites. Unrig.net has my 3-minute pitch to the president. RobertDavidSteele.com has everything I've ever written, including what I was recommended for the Nobel for, which I would like to help Xi, Putin, and Trump win. I'm the only guy that has integrated holistic analytics, true cost economics, and open source everything engineering. There are 9 open source everything engineering domains, 27 subdomains, and in the aggregate, they lower the cost of creating a prosperous world at peace by 90%. So a John Deere tractor that costs $250. Shut up, John. Stop. Let me finish this sentence. Don't be rude. A John Deere tractor that costs $250,000 can be built for $25,000 using open source everything. And that's Marcin Jakubowski in open source ecology. And so from one asshole to another, thank you for having me here, John.
Thank you, Robert. Now, I hope you'll all join us back in the room back there where we've got a little wine and cheese, and Robert will